This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mathieu on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Earnings Watch here. Team coverage coming up. Michael Barr with us as well in the news. Barr steeled for the Detroit Tigers tomorrow. Skubal will pitch. John Tucker in for Lisa Mathieu. John, there was a Lisa sighting, Rodeo Drive, Beverly Hills.
She'll be back, I think, Monday. We think.
We think that she's got the Gulf Stream this time around. Francine was supposed to have it, but Lisa's got the Gulf Stream.
Special coverage.
Somebody said, does Lisa have the 650 like Michael Jordan? I said, no.
Maybe. Oh, did you see that? And the paint job on that thing?
I know.
Wow. He's got a new boat and a new jet. So I think this Nike thing is working out for him.
It's working out for him, to say the least. If you see that movie out a year ago on Michael Jordan, it was really extraordinary. Okay, we're going to pause here right now because Paul and I have seen the racket for years. The earnings come out, and there's an analysis, and then there's one or two conference calls, and everybody goes mental. The major mental, Paul, is JPMorgan does not want to admit how big they are, how dominant they are, and how profitable they are.
Yeah, just extraordinary, Tom. I mean, here's a company, 600 billion market cap, stocks up, 25% year to date, solid results. I thought their quarter numbers came out here darn good. Here's a company that's going to print maybe $175 billion of revenue this year, maybe $50 billion of net profit this year. Right. So some extraordinary numbers coming
off the bottom of the pandemic, 25% per year, up 175%. What do? I really don't care what Jamie Dimon says. All I would turn to is Max. Max does my JPMorgan analysis. Max Abelson at Bloomberg is legendary for doing nothing. It's incredible. Exactly. The amount of time he spends in the food court, except 4 days of the year when JPMorgan's earnings come out, Abelson out with the ratios because Max knows. I mean, there's this, blah, blah, blah. Guess what, folks? JPMorgan with incredible ratios to get things started. 15% increase in book value, big double-digit increase there. And, of course, we saw it as a return on equity, 16%, estimated 14.5%. I don't know how Catherine Doherty puts up with Max. He's so quick here when it comes out about the profit-making machine that it is stock. We're going to dive in with Allison Williams, Gerard Cassidy to join us here, I believe, in the 8 o'clock hour right now from the Interactive Broker Studios. Our Bloomberg Business Flash, John Tucker.
All right, third quarter bank earnings, JPM pre-market right now up 1.9%, making money hand over fist. JPM net interest income better than expected for the quarter, better than expected trading and banking fees, and again up right now close to 1.9% pre-market. Then you have Wells Fargo, those shares pre-market up 3.2%. Third quarter net interest income, a slight miss there. Deposits were in line. Outlook a little worse than expected. There's a lower than expected loss provision. Shares, again, right now up 3.2%. BNY Mellon, adjusted earnings per share, $1.52. That's a 10-cent beat. A net interest revenue, $1.05 billion. That's a beat. And the provision for credit losses, $23 million. That's almost double what we expected. Also, shares of Tesla, they're actually the most active pre-market, down 6%. Elon Musk unveiling the long-awaited prototype of Tesla's Cybercab. Production could start next year. The vehicle priced under $30,000. And as we look at the futures right now, Dow futures up 21, S&P futures, they're down 2. The NASDAQ futures right now 47 points lower. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney, scope and scale here. And there's any number of ways to do this. And I think the coverage that Bloomberg News does on this, it's been developed really over decades, is world class. You take the revenue. Max whispered in my ear the revenue number last night, so I could do the math early. I got the abacus out. They basically generate over a 90-day period, because Jamie Dimon's working weekends. $477 million per day. I mean, the scope and scale, folks, here, I think is way underplayed. JPMorgan building the new Manse on Park Avenue, 313,206 warm bodies at JPMorgan.
Yep. And what I love about the conference call for Jamie Dimon is because the JPMorgan Chase, that institution, their Chase Manhattan branches all around the world, they see small and mid-sized businesses. And then the corporate and investment bank of the mighty JPMorgan, New York and London and Hong Kong, they talk to every corporate, large, mega company in the globe. So they see everybody. Their credit cards, they see individuals. So they have just such a great feel for what's going on out there in the marketplace, I think.
Every day after the show, folks, and it's sort of like an entertainment crucible in here. I mean, Sweeney goes at 12 noon. I don't know how he does it. I decompress on a couch up in our famed food court, and I sit there. People show up. It's just great. The number of people that, guests that drop by. Tom Michaud sits down last night, best small banker in America, of course, at Keefe Bruyette and Woods, a Stifel company. And Tom Michaud and I talked about it, and he was really, really emphasizing the need for technology. You have to have small bank, mid bank, big bank, a technology edge.
Yeah.
Can we suggest, Paul, that just possibly JPMorgan leading the way in technology, maybe a hat tip to Bank of America as well?
I think you're exactly right, Tom. I remember Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman Sachs maybe 10 years ago saying Goldman Sachs is a technology company.
It's a technology.
I was like, wow.
Allison Williams nodding her head. We're thrilled she's here. She got out the Kufel and Esser slide rule to really dive into things. Allison, let's just go to the technology first before we get into this juggernaut, this once-in-a-lifetime company. Does JPMorgan lead in technology investment?
I mean, I think that the proof is in the pudding, as they say, right? And so they spend a lot.
Yeah.
And that's always been impressive. But from our point of view, it's always tough to tell from the outside of the banks, right? We know our customers' experiences. We hear from this person, that person. But they are winning. They're winning deposit share. They're winning trading market share. And I think that is from this virtuous cycle of being willing to spend and invest.
Great. Paul wants to get serious questions here. I got to go to tawdry gossip. The Apple-Goldman Sachs relationship is a train wreck. Why should Jamie Dimon pick up that headache?
Well, I mean, so here's two things, right? JPMorgan, longtime lender, leader in the credit card business, right? So they've been investing, they've been growing that business for ages.
Is it like buying Bear Stearns for $1, whatever he bought it for?
Well, I think that, that's two different stories, right? So Jamie will spend and invest and spend money on technology, but they'll also keep some set aside in terms of capital for when there's opportunities in the market. And Goldman, by the way, right, it's all about what is your competitive advantage, what are you good at? And I think that Goldman, at one point in time, coming out of the global financial crisis, right, people were skeptical on trading, what's the future? Goldman said, okay, let's look at trying to go into this segment that we've always ignored, this consumer segment. They did a bunch of things, and more recently Solomon said, you know what, not working, we're going to cut it, we're going to get out.
What do you hear from the big banks that you cover, Allison? You've covered them for so long. Are they actually, what's loan demand like? Because all we hear about is private credit here, private credit there. I used to make a killing leverage lending. What are they saying about loan growth these days?
And the banks are trying to get involved in various ways in private credit, but at the end of the day, the bread and butter business, if you will, right? Consumer, commercial real estate, card has been, the big driver for JPMorgan, for Citi, even like Wells getting more into it, Bank of America, perhaps a little bigger portfolio, but less interested in at the margin. But what we're looking for this quarter is that bread and butter, C&I, commercial and industrial lending. Are we seeing a pickup? It looks like we're seeing a pickup in the Federal Reserve data, but are we seeing it at the bank?
It's totally unfair because you need a couple hours to digest this, but the gloom of the media, OMG, net interest income, we're all going to die. JPMorgan just turned that on their head, didn't they?
Yeah, so JPMorgan, it's interesting, right? Because in September, Dan Pinto coming out and saying, look, you're all too high. But if you parse his exact comment was like the decrease you're seeing is too high, right? So now that they're guiding up, for 2024.
Right.
Does that imply a little bit better run rate for next year? But one point I'll make on the upsized guidance, it really is about the beat this quarter. So upping that core net interest income guidance by about $500 million. And that's sort of about the beat that we saw this quarter.
Catherine Doherty out, headcount up 2% year over year. Again, there are 316,000 employees number. All of them are going to pack into the new manse on Park Avenue. Allison Williams, thank you, saving us through the banking season. If you see Max Abelson, Max and I are not on speaking terms, but if you see Max Abelson, thank him for the world-class top live as well. Red and green on the screen right now on a Friday with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. Hurricane Milton's devastating path across Florida has left at least 10 dead, millions without power, and destroyed homes and crops. Governor Ron DeSantis.
Faced 2 hurricanes in a couple weeks. Not easy to go through, but I've seen a lot of resilience throughout this state. I think people just, when you're a Floridian, you kind of just know, these are things that can happen, and you roll with it.
Governor DeSantis warns it could take days to assess the full extent of the damages. The Nobel Peace Prize for 2024 was announced today. The winners, a group of survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Nihon Dankyo, who created a grassroots effort to end the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Authorities say 12 people have been rescued after being trapped for hours at the bottom of a former Colorado gold mine when an elevator malfunctioned at the tourist site. One person died in the accident yesterday. The elevator was descending into the Molly Kathleen gold mine near the town of Cripple Creek when it had a mechanical problem after the tourists were trapped 1,000 feet beneath the surface. Teller County Sheriff Jason Mikesell.
Once they were able to identify that there were no other issues that could cause a problem with the equipment, they were able to lower it back down without anyone in it and then bring it back up to make sure that it was going to run correctly. And then we decided on a plan to go ahead and do that, bring them back up.
The people were trapped in the mine for hours before being rescued. Secretary of State Antony Blinken told Southeast Asian leaders today that the U.S. is concerned about China's increasingly dangerous and unlawful activities in the disputed South China Sea during an annual summit meeting. Blinken pledged the U.S. will continue to uphold freedom of navigation in the vital sea trade route. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
Garrett Cole. We never talk enough about the Yankees because I have trouble talking about the dreaded New York Yankees. I turned to Yankees expert Paul Sweeney. The team changed when he showed up. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, in my mind, he's truly an ace. You use that term a lot for a lot of these pitchers, but to me, he is the ace of the staff, and he pitches like an ace, and he does it in some big games here. So the Yankees really needed him last night to step up, and he did, and they got just enough offense to move to the next round. So here we go, and I'm not sure if we're going to see Michael Barr's Tigers or not. We'll see tonight.
I don't know, have to see, but I think Gerard Cole doesn't get enough play, because he's a really low-key, intense guy.
He is, and he's on a team with, Aaron Judge
exactly.
and Juan Soto and things like that.
The rest of it as well. Garrett Cole, congratulations to the Yankees, and I hope that the Tigers
Me too.
take them. Oh, go. Thank you, Michael, for that. Skoo-ball tomorrow. Tigers ball. Red and green on the screen right now. The VIX 20.90 on YouTube worldwide. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash being brought to you by IBKR. Financial advisors switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey custody solutions. No ticket charges, no conflicts of your interest at ibkr.com/RIA. Here's some comments from Jamie Dimon. Quote, inflation is slowing, he writes, and the U.S. economy remains resilient. Shares pre-market up close to 2% right now. JPM's banking revenue saw a 31% increase from this time last year. Equity underwriting up to 26%. Debt underwriting, that was up 56% to $1.08 billion. Fees from M&A, they were up 10%. That's better than estimates. On the guidance, net interest income, about $91.5 billion, $500 million better than originally thought. Wells Fargo shares right now pre-market, they are up right around 3%. They posted third quarter profit that topped analyst expectations. They had a surge in investment banking fees, so that helped counter the dip in lending revenue as interest rates fell. Investment banking fees rose 37%. Also out this morning, another key reading on inflation. Producer prices for the month of September forecast to have risen about 0.1%. That comes out at 8:30 Wall Street time. Most active pre-market shares of Tesla down 6.5%. They unveiled the self-driving Cybercab prototype, greeted with skepticism. Dow futures up 11. S&P futures down 4. NASDAQ futures down 54. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Morgan Stanley sell side was brutal. I don't have the headline in front of me, but they did not mince words. They were unimpressed with the Musk presentation. Don't have it in front of me, but you know.
I mean,
there's not just the cab, but there's a commuter
like a
van
yes.
Portion of it too, and he claims that the expenses for this will be much, much cheaper than, say, operating a city bus on the streets of Manhattan, for instance.
All right. They look cool.
Sci-fi. They look cool. Red and green on the screen right now. The VIX 20.90. Dan Skelly's with us today. Of course, we got Harvard football coming up in the 9 o'clock hour. We do note that Brown defeated Harvard a week or so ago.
Wow. All right.
That's the only reason Skelly's on today is to talk about that. From Brown University, and of course with Morgan Stanley, Daniel Skelly joins us right now. Dan, what's defensive value? Come on, it's a bunch of Morgan Stanley talk. Describe defensive value.
Absolutely. And good morning, Tom and Paul and Andrew Sheets and Lisa Shallot and I were all doing cartwheels in the hallway.
It's like the Brown Mafia.
Yep, I know.
I mean, this is Lisa Shallot's fault. It's Lisa Shallot's fault. Morgan Stanley just goes up and they go, should we recruit from RISD or Brown? You make the call. Dan, continue.
Defensive value, Tom, in our opinion, is looking at companies that have strong balance sheets, strong capital return via dividends and potentially buybacks, but also have some possible rotation benefit, right? When you think about that market rally from October of 22, really till June of 24, it was all about Mag 7. It was all about growth stocks, all about tech. And as you know, we've seen a pretty aggressive rotation into both some cyclical value, financials, industrials, materials. But to your point, the yield plays, REIT, utilities, they're working too. So that's how I would look at defensive value.
So, Dan, as a head of the equity model portfolio solutions, is an equity model like just owning the Mag 7, or how else do you construct an equity model these days?
Sure, Paul. I think one of the best expressions I've heard recently on your program related to the Mag 7 is it's not so much even having fundamental analysts cover those names anymore. At $3 trillion in market cap and 70 analysts covering the names, how much incremental information is there, right? It's more of a risk management type framework at this point. And so look, what we would say and what we've been actively doing on our portfolios is we've been rotating those Mag 7 names from active overweights to more of an equal weight type position. And as mentioned earlier, going into different barbells of the value trade, both cyclical value, but also some defensive value.
So how do you define value these days?
So looking at value, it's definitely looking at classic metrics like PEs and price to book and EBITDA, EV to EBITDA, et cetera. But at the same time, Paul, we've emphasized don't just buy value in and of itself. You have to overlay that valuation screen with quality metrics today. Look, even if the Fed is able to cut 7 or 8 times over the next year and a half, your floor, your terminal rate on Fed funds is still going to be around 3.5%. And if we add in a premium, dependent on whatever your view of the deficit is, whoever's in Washington, et cetera, you're going to have like a 4% long end, meaning there is a cost of capital in this cycle, which is different from the post-08 experience. So you need to own quality, strong balance sheet value.
What do you say, Dan, to people that have missed this bull market? Okay, it's the weekend here. It's finally getting a little chilly in New York. Are you making Thanksgiving reservations yet, Paul?
Oh, no, please.
I mean, I think it's a little rushed, but I'm there. Dan Skelly, what do you say to people looking at the leaves change that go, I miss this bull market? What do they do?
I think the fall is one of the most beautiful times and seasonally. And look, what we would say is the market is shifting. And the market, as you know, Tom, it's climbed a wall of worry the last 2 years. 2 years ago, recession or not. And now we're in that kind of soft landing conclusion. This year, would the Fed be proactive or reactive with Fed cuts? And now we've definitively seen the Fed cut with a GDP growing at 3%. Once we get past the election, Tom, we think that serves as another clearing event. But it's not about index level returns. The nature of this market over the next 6 to 12 months is going to be way more idiosyncratic, favoring this rotation, finding bottom-up ideas.
Dan Skelly, thank you so much. With Morgan Stanley on short notice this morning. Really appreciate it here. On this idea of value, and it's going to be one of the real topics over the weekend. Should I stay in Mag 7?
Yeah.
Did you see how NVIDIA on a relative performance is rocking it this week?
Yeah, they're starting to come back in. The AI trade is getting a little bit more love here these days. We had a period of time where people were saying, wait a minute, what am I spending all this money on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the top line, folks. I can't say enough about our banking team. That's this started out with like Otis Bilodeau. They were using quill and ink.
Yeah.
And now they got this fancy thing going. And Catherine Doherty's just killing it here. Headcount up 2% at JPMorgan. She's tearing apart the expenses like an animal. I mean, it's just, it's a juggernaut. And I really take issue with the way they undersell their success. JPMorgan, and I don't own it, folks. I'm not trying to sell the stock. Okay, banking revenue helped results, topping consensus, the banking part, the people with the expensive suits.
Right.
Estimate was just under $2 billion, and they came in 10% above that, $2.27 billion, up 31% from last year. Should we let the realtors in the Hamptons know?
I think you might. I mean, and if I'm going to go into my boss at year end, I'm going to say, you got to pay me now. I just put up some big numbers. And Tom, also the trading desk, the equity and the fixed income trading desk also beat expectations there. So, I mean, you looked up and down the income statement for JPMorgan, darn solid.
Right.
And, I don't know how you compete against those guys.
Max Abelson's killing me, folks, this morning. He's got Jamie Dimon in the conference call saying he's going to tell shareholders he's maintaining, quote, our modest pace of buybacks. And then Max goes all Shakespearean on me. Diamond giveth, diamond can taketh away.
Right, that's right.
It's very Max.
It is very Max. And so, but again, I think a lot of folks now seeing these numbers are going to feel, obviously pretty solid about the finances of JPMorgan. Now that we hear what Jamie Dimon has to say about the future. Yeah,
we'll have to see on the future. The past is simple, way above nominal GDP performance. I went back and looked at 20 years back, 11.8% per year returned. 30 years back, are you ready for this statistic?
I've been there.
13% per year. The banks, they may make 7-8%, maybe just nominal 5% or whatever. 13% a year for 30 years. Has Apple done that? Thanks to Max Abelson, the team, Rick Green on T-Live, the best in the business here on the banks. Gerard Cassidy coming up in the next hour. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg News with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Let's start with JPMorgan shares up pre-market. Right now about 2% higher. It reported a surprise gain in net interest income, raising their forecast for that key revenue source as well. Revenue from the Wall Street operations defying analyst estimates. Investment banking fees surging 31%. That topped estimates. We were looking for 16% gain there. Equity traders also notching a 27% revenue increase. And then onto Wells Fargo. That's up about 3% pre-market. A surge in investment banking fees helped counter a dip in lending revenue. Banking fees rising 37% in the third quarter. That helped lift non-interest income. That climbed 12% to $8.7 billion in the period. And then Bank of New York Mellon, they actually kicked off the third quarter earnings this morning, coming in first. Profit topping expectations there, lifting its shares pre-market trading. Bigger and bigger and bigger. BlackRock pulling in a record $221 billion of total client cash last quarter. So this pushes the world's largest money manager to an all-time high of $11.5 trillion of assets. And then this is just the headline you need to know. Tesla's self-driving cybercab prototypes greeted with skepticism. That's most active pre-market shares of Tesla. Right now down 6%.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, big drop.
Dow futures down 3, S&P futures down 5, NASDAQ futures down 6. We check the markets for you all day long. Right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash, Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. At Bloomberg Surveillance, when we put the show together, we have endless meetings, endless Zoom. Paul lives on Zoom. And the answer is there's a 1 o'clock meeting, and Paul comes off with Alex Steele, and we argue for an hour. And then there's a 7 p.m. meeting that lasts for 45 minutes, and sometimes there'll be an emergency 3 a.m. meeting. The biggest argument we've had in 100 days was, are we really going to have somebody from Robinhood on to talk strategy? And Stephanie Gould came in and hit the ball out of the park, over the turnpike, over the cask and flagon. She killed it. We had a huge response to Stephanie Gould joining us from Robinhood, where she does strategy. Thrilled she could join us in studio this morning. I love how you say we're in a soft landing cycle, the fourth since John F. Kennedy. And in there is what Robinhood does, which is leading with technology. How much do we underestimate the technology overlay that gives JPMorgan the kind of earnings we just saw?
Yeah, I think it's huge. If you look at the fourth, soft landings in the past, there are 3 elements. The first is companies allowed margin compression. And if you look at the last, 4 out of 6 quarters, companies allowed for, disappointing margins relative to expectations. Another thing you had is that the Fed cut within 6 months of the last hike. We didn't get that this time, but we have had a lot of stimulus, fiscal stimulus out there, which I think kind of is doing its job when it comes to kind of providing relief from higher interest rates. And then the third is that each of those times there was increased investment in R&D and intellectual property, and you have that in spades right now with AI, and that's why I think it's the key.
Robinhood, individual investors, retail.
Yeah.
What's their risk tolerance these days? The people you talk to at Robinhood, the account holders there, how do they feel about this market? Are they buying it? Are they concerned about it? It's gone too far, too fast, too expensive? Where are they?
No, they are investing. I'd say, one thing I think we're in is, and I've talked about this before, but we're in a market of stocks. It's no longer, to me, just a stock market because we have higher interest rates, and I think that's like a paradigm shift after, over a decade. And so they are investing, and they are investing in individual names. The average age is 34. They mostly have time on their side, and they're investing in long-term trends. However, they consistently show that they manage around their positions. So when there's, the stocks they own go up, they tend to trim them. So last month they were trimming Tesla. And when their stocks go down, they buy a little more around the positions that they hold. So what
are you? Are you the adult in the room at Robinhood? Are you like, hello, you don't need, you're talking to Lisa Mateo's kids. And Stephanie's saying, don't day trade, don't trade day traded video?
We welcome all kinds of investors.
Oh, here we go.
We do. I mean, it's true. Like part of Robinhood was sort of built to be like, do what is best for you. But I do have to say that I've seen an increasing trend of when the markets go down, a purchase of just broad-based index funds, more so than I had seen in the last couple of years.
Looking at your notes here, you still have a 5,800 target for the S&P 500, but you do acknowledge there's a chance here, maybe 6,100 is not out of the ballpark. So what gets you from kind of where we are here to maybe higher?
6,100. I think we have to get through the election because, historically speaking, you usually have lower returns in advance of an election. And I think we have to just get a little more clarity on the job market and related to that, what the Fed's going to do. I think that we had claims yesterday and it was weaker than expected. But, week to week, you're going to have volatility, especially with the hurricanes. So I'm sort of not that focused on it, but the market seems to be every tick. So just want a little bit sort of longer trajectory, like confirmation that we are in this soft landing.
Your definition of the exuberance right now, how do you describe, rather, the exuberance that's out there right now? I'm not sure I see exuberance. I still think there's a lot of skeptical people, and that to me is supportive of the market. There's still a lot of people that just don't believe it. Everything's going wrong underneath. This is, a bubble forming. I'm not there yet. And I think, once you get everyone jumping in, that's when I get nervous. Like 2019, I remember some of my most skeptical clients were finally jumping in, and I said, take a little breather.
How about small and mid-cap stocks? Is that something that your clients at Robinhood, do they trade in more often than not?
How about small stocks and meme stocks?
Meme stocks, yeah. So how do you talk about small mid-cap stocks to your clients?
Yeah, I mean, small cap, I made a call sometime around, I want to say like July, that I said, like, we just need some confirmation that inflation is under control. And there was this pivot point, and that, and then small caps can start to take off, because really the first half of the year they were not doing well. That kind of came to fruition. Now I'm a little bit more in the mid-cap camp, because we have had a good run in the markets, and mid-cap to me has like sort of that Goldilocks thing, which is, better valuations than large cap, but a little higher quality than small cap. Yeah. So that's kind of where I am. Meme stocks, like, that's just the things that our customers invest in. Like, they believe in those companies and the shifting that they can, kind of be around. So who are we to judge?
JPMorgan has 313,000 working. Vlad's got 2,200 bodies out of Menlo Park. Yeah. When Vlad calls you, what do you tell him about the future of the brokerage industry, the investment industry? What are you telling him about where we're going to be in 5 years?
I think that there is still a lot of access to provide to the everyday person. I think for a long time, and I worked at JPMorgan's private bank for 11 years, like, there's so much opportunity when you work at a place or when you are a customer of a place that has, advisors thinking about you all the time. And I think, like, providing self-directed access was the first step of Robinhood, and I think that there's a lot more to come.
What's the biggest myth, stereotype of Robinhood that the public gets wrong when you're working in the trenches every day?
That we're not serious, and that is not true. Mm-hmm. Like, I think we're very serious about our mission. Everybody here is very aligned with our mission.
What I see with my kids, Paul, to editorialize, they're intimidated by a modest bank like JPMorgan. They're intimidated by Abby Johnson's miracle up at Devonshire Street in Boston. They're not intimidated by Stephanie Gould.
I have 4 offspring. They are all Robinhood clients. One had to drop because he now works for a big financial institution, so he's not allowed to have a Robinhood account. But this is what blew me away, Tom. Robinhood, I haven't looked at it in forever. $22.5 billion market cap. Stock's doubled this year. I mean, so these guys know what they're doing, I guess. So, what is when you talk to your clients? Do you say just own stocks, have a diversified portfolio? What's that conversation like?
I think everyone should know what their triangle is. I say it's a triangle because you want a solid foundation of an emergency savings that's equivalent to 3 to 12 months of your expenses. Then you want a diversified portfolio that kind of gives you that sort of, I'm just going to put it away and not look at it and be long term. We're really serious about saving for retirement because we know the fiscal deficit is going to rear its ugly head at some point. So we give everybody a match for every dollar they contribute to a retirement account of 1%. And then, after that, I think on top of that, that's where your aspirational stuff is. Like, you do need to take some risk to get long-term growth.
This is great. Bring Vlad next time. Stephanie Gould, thank you. She said the triangle. That's like the triangle of tuition.
Yeah.
Same thing. Stephanie Gould, thank you, so much. With Robinhood, love having her in. It's just a whole totally different view, and you heard her optimism there on Standard & Poor's 500. Our optimism is a little red on the screen, but a better tape. Futures at -5. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. The number of power outages is declining, but the fatality count is on the rise a day and a half after Hurricane Milton visited Florida. At least 10 people are dead. About 2.5 million homes and businesses are still without power, but the Sunshine State is trying to stay positive. St. Petersburg Police Chief Anthony Holloway says the people of Florida are resilient and will get through this.
There's a lot of fatigue that's starting to sit in with people. So we're just trying to make sure that we can tell everybody that, it's going to be okay. We just got to turn the corner, and we'll be fine. We'll get through this together.
Chief Holloway spoke to ABC. Secretary of State Antony Blinken used the annual ASEAN summit to have a platform for peace and all across the world. In addition to calling on China to reduce its antagonizing behavior in the South China Sea, Blinken addressed other challenges, including the tensions in the Middle East and the war in Ukraine.
Because they know that if any country is allowed to act with impunity and to commit acts of aggression, that's a signal to would-be aggressors everywhere that it's open season, and that's going to be bad for everyone.
Secretary Blinken also noted the civil war in Myanmar, North Korea's destabilizing behavior. The Nobel Peace Prize for 2024 was announced this morning.
The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided to award the Peace Prize for 2024 to the Japanese organization Nihon Hidankyo.
The organization is a group of survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki who have created a grassroots effort to end the proliferation of nuclear weapons. This year's Nobel Peace Prize had more than 286 nominations. Yesterday was World Mental Health Day. People are asked to prioritize their own mental well-being. Experts say over 70% of individuals with mental health conditions do not receive the care they need. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney, Abelson's just sick over at T-Line. He gets into the dirt here. Card services, which I think is the credit cards and auto, up 11%, 11%, reflecting higher net interest income and the inability of Paul Sweeney's kids to bring the balance down to zero.
Exactly. I didn't know people still do that, but I know they do, and man, that's costly. That is like mistake 101.
I just saw John
finance.
Tucker. I just saw the interest rate is up to 21%. When we were kids, that was biblical, or
Guess what
somebody
just
in
happened?
New Jersey.
The oldest one just put his final tuition tab on my credit card.
There you go. Well, you're getting the points. You're getting the points, John.
No, I'm not getting points.
Points, and that's the whole wreck. I mean, I don't even know. Max will tell me. Is it Jamie Dimon that's winning with points, or is it United Airlines? I don't know which.
Kids
the
play the
granularity
points.
here is just amazing.
Yeah, it is. But JPMorgan's in seemingly every business in financial services, so you got to break it down here. You need the max.
I'm trying to look for some negative stuff here. Banking and wealth management revenue cratered, down 11%. I don't know why. I think they're doing fine. High asset management fees of JPMorgan.
All I want to know is when's the new building on Park Avenue opening?
Yeah,
so I want to go to that,
cool.
Check that out.
It's very cool.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
I heard Gabriela Santos, her office, it's unbelievable. She can see New Jersey.
Where'd you hear that from?
This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Let's do JPMorgan Chase. Here's the vigil. Hand over fist with money. Shares, they paired actually some of the earlier gains, up about 1% right now for JPM. Net interest income of the company coming in at $23.4 billion. That's a huge beat from the estimates, even when management said to temper your expectations. And Wells Fargo pre-market, early trading, those shares, they are up close to 3.5%. The mortgage banking non-interest income beating estimates there. Let's do China real quick. Expect something from China this weekend, maybe. Investors and analysts expecting China to deploy as much as $283 billion in fresh fiscal stimulus. Let's do France today. They said they're raising taxes on the rich. Could prompt some to move out of France, and others who might have been considering settling in the country to cancel their plans there. Dow futures down 16. S&P futures down 5. NASDAQ futures down 57 points. And we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. We spend too much time on fancy people on Park Avenue. Good morning, Winona, Minnesota, with 20,000, 21,000 employees. Fastenal,
Yeah.
as boring as you can get. Company, they do fasteners, Fastenal, cutting tools, metalworking, lifting, plumbing, lubricant, other related projects. They're at 69, make it 70. They're up $3 to 73 on earnings. You ready? The last 10 years, this isn't Jamie Dimon and some fancy people, taking lunch. They're down there at the new place in the Citadel building.
Yep.
They're not over at the Monkey Bar. They're in Winona, Minnesota.
Yeah.
Popping 15% per year.
Nice.
Total return. We go Apple, JPMorgan, the 12 stocks we follow here, folks. Good morning, out in Minnesota, Winona, Minnesota. Fastenal, getting it done. Getting it done as well into the weekend. Joseph Mathieu joins us right now. Balance of power. My head's spinning. Joe Matthew's head spinning. Kaylee Lines knows exactly what's going on. Joe Mathieu, what do the two candidates need to do to get to Monday?
To get to Monday, what a question. It's interesting because Donald Trump's going through Aurora, Colorado to get to Monday. Kamala Harris has a very different path. She's coming off this Univision town hall last night, and it's pretty stark when you look at the contrast between these two candidates. Donald Trump today wants to talk about Venezuelan gangs taking over a town that most Americans have not heard of. Kamala Harris is going to be getting briefed by FEMA today and talking about damage estimates and hurricane disaster recovery. The fact is, both seem to be working. This is a tied race, Tom. It's a 1-point race in every state that counts, maybe not Minnesota. And so all the experts are scratching their heads wondering how to answer that question.
Well, you mentioned, Joe, that Kamala Harris at a town hall with Univision last night. So I guess it begs a question, how crucial is the Latino vote, and how's it breaking?
Well, very. And look, the narrative going into Kamala Harris arriving at the top of the ticket was Donald Trump is taking these votes away from Democrats, young black males, young Latino males specifically. And it's not lost on us that Barack Obama started his series of events for Kamala Harris last evening in Pittsburgh by speaking directly to young black men, suggesting they might have a problem voting for a woman. But look, that was a really different town hall than one that you would see from Donald Trump. It was very emotional. People were crying. They're talking about health care bills. They're talking about lifestyle stuff, where Donald Trump was speaking to the Detroit Economic Club yesterday, a 2-hour stem winder in which he relitigated the 2020 election. And about an hour and a half in, he did drop a new idea. Guys, we're less than a month away from the election, and we're still hearing new policy proposals, in this case, a tax deduction for your car insurance payments. Paul, that might save you a little bit of money.
That might save me a little bit of money. It just feels like both candidates are just throwing things out there that they feel are polling well, and what do you take? How about President Biden here? What role do we expect him and maybe his administration to play over the coming weeks here as we get to November 5th?
You know, it's interesting. He seems to be unleashed a bit by not being at the top of the ticket. His favorability ratings are up about 5 to 10 points, depending on the metric you're looking at. It's a pretty significant move since he left the race. And it was remarkable to see the president of the United States fact-checking Donald Trump from a presidential podium in the Roosevelt Room the other night when it comes to the misinformation around the storm. He's got the opportunity now to just go after Donald Trump all he wants and let Kamala Harris speak to more lofty ideas, although she's done some of that herself. It's just an interesting role that he's carving out for himself at the moment, not being in the race anymore.
Joe, you're qualified more than anybody I know to answer this. This came up a couple days ago on the old Republicans, including Mitt Romney. Now, I would have said Mitt Romney was 59, maybe 66. Governor Romney's 77. Okay, it's like the old guard's getting older. I don't know if you knew that, Joe. But my answer is, after Trump, where are the Mitt Romneys of the Republican Party? Do you have any clue on that question?
The Mitt Romneys are retiring, even the young ones. Look at the Mike Gallaghers of the world who said, this is clearly not my place here in Washington. Everyone in the Republican Party wants to answer your question, Tom, by pointing to J.D. Vance. And he is not Ronald Reagan's Republican here, but they see that as the future of a populist Republican Party. Tom, the question is, does MAGA go back home after Donald Trump leaves the picture, whether he serves another term or not?
Joe, the heart of the matter is, in Belmont, Massachusetts, there's there's like 5 Republicans, I think, left. Joe Mathieu, are we talking about the great unspoken here, which is finally a third party in America?
Well, gosh, would you call it the Trump party? I don't know. Maybe establishment Republicans want to make their own. I don't know that they're going to have a lot of luck with that. He could get together with Bill Weld. Maybe they could go out to dinner in Belmont. But look, you're pointing to something that's important. When we talk to Republicans here on the air, they're not always reflecting the view of MAGA. When you go to CPAC, they're not always reflecting the view of Republicans. So maybe we do have 3 parties right now.
I mean, one day I was at Lockover's under that portrait my grandmother wouldn't let me look at. There's Bill Weld dining with Mitt Romney. It's gone. It's just absolutely. It's like the Red Sox. They're gone.
I don't know where that party went to.
Along with the 6 coaches, Tom, where are they going?
Joe, what happens? The evening of the election, the day after that. What are we going to know? What aren't we going to know? How long could this go on? Do you think? What's the thinking in D.C.?
Well, look, it took till Saturday last time. The conventional wisdom is if this is a Trump win, they call it that night. If this is a Kamala Harris win, I'll meet you on Saturday when we're still going to be finishing counting the votes here. Look, Pennsylvania doesn't even start counting the mail-in ballots until that morning. You're going to come into work with Tom on Wednesday. Kaylee and I are still going to be there wondering how the hell this thing is going to end, and we're going to spend all week probably talking about it. Unless this breaks one way or the other. We've got 3.5 weeks for something big to happen. Where's the October surprise, guys?
I was supposed to be down in Jamaica, east of Montego Bay.
Yeah.
And they said, no, you got to do the Joe Mathieu schedule. I had to clear my schedule from November 2nd to like November 10th.
No Jamaica, man.
On the edge of Joe Mathieu. Because, folks,
so when are we allowed to go to Negril? Is that like Thanksgiving now?
Thanksgiving now, yeah. Maybe. We'll have to see on it. Joe Mathieu leading our coverage here, Balance of Power with Kaylee Lyons. And, of course, 12 noon. They do it again at 5 p.m. As I can't say enough about the commitment there to going deeper than what you see within the political malaise of America. Really, and a great discussion there on a Republican Party of Boston of long ago. Good morning, Mr. Weld and Mr. Romney and all of Boston at 92.9 FM. Total tantrum, Paul. I mean, one of Sweeney's handlers called me up and said Sweeney is just fed up with Tom Petty. And so we have to do a New Jersey Friday. I mean, it was required. And, when a kid does a song on spec with no money, they had to bring in musicians to play. This kid, how do you pronounce his name?
Exactly.
And they had a song that did better than good. So we'll start there with Mr. Bon Jovi. Lives next door to John Tucker. So, they're down there. They're down there. They hang out and all that. Futures at -6 here. In the next hour, I can't say enough. Gerard Cassidy to be with us on the strength of JPMorgan. On YouTube, stay with us.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in that fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mathieu on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mathieu on the Gulf Stream. John Tucker in today for Lisa Mathieu. She's been out with Lucas Shaw doing the Hollywood screen time
hobnobbing.
thing.
Yep.
You know, I mean, she's down
Clubbing.
at Michael's there in Santa Monica. Long lunch, 3-hour lunch and all that. And good morning, Santa Monica. Good morning, Michael's as well. Lisa, she loved the lunch. It was really...
Well, she deserves it.
She does.
The salad was $49. I mean, I don't know. It's a hell of an avocado. We hope to get Lisa back here by Monday. We will see. It's an interesting day, and I really can't say enough. We've really played it up, but the juggernaut of profit that we're seeing on Wall Street is really tangible.
Yep, and even Wells Fargo as well. I was looking at some of those numbers. The investment bankers were busy there this quarter at Wells Fargo, a huge increase there. So I guess September, the biggest month of new issuance in the corporate bond market. Why not?
We say good morning on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Wonderful to have the head of the Sovereign Wealth Fund of the Philippines in yesterday. Can't say enough. We didn't know this. I didn't know it, certainly. Maybe some of Ray YouTube knew it, but I didn't know it, that the reach of YouTube worldwide is completely underestimated by Americans. Good morning to all of you worldwide listening right now on YouTube. It is the new access and new distribution of what we're doing at Bloomberg Surveillance. On your commute across the nation, good morning. Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, Sirius XM on the New York State Thruway from Buffalo to Rochester.
No, thank you.
And you stop at Nick Tahoe's and have a garbage plate. I mean, that's what you do in Western New York. We'll get to that in a moment. From the Interactive Broker Studios with our Bloomberg Business Flash, John Tucker.
All right, futures right now indicate slightly lower open for Wall Street. Dow futures down 15. S&P E-mini futures 6 points lower. And the NASDAQ futures are down 63. JPMorgan Chase reporting surprise gain in net interest income for the third quarter. Also raising the forecast for net interest income. Revenue from the bank's Wall Street operations defying estimates. Investment banking fees surging 31%. The equity traders, they notched a 27% revenue increase. Jamie Dimon, in his accompanying statement, said, while inflation is slowing and the U.S. economy remains resilient, there are several critical issues that do remain. I don't know why he's less than upbeat in that, but anyway, he cited fiscal deficits, infrastructure needs, and remilitarization. Shares of JPM 1% higher pre-market. Wells Fargo, third quarter profit topping expectations. A surge in investment banking fees that countered a dip in lending revenue as interest rates fall. Investment banking fees rising 37%. And Wells Fargo shares, they are up 3.3% pre-market. BlackRock wants to become a one-stop shop for stocks, bonds, and private assets. It's on the right path. They pulled in a record $221 billion of total client cash last quarter. The world's largest money manager, now at an all-time high of $11.5 trillion. That's trillion with a T.
They get some of your money there, Mr. Tucker? Sounds like that quarter.
No.
I see numbers like that.
I don't have any money. Most active pre-market shares of Tesla down over 6%. Self-driving cyber cab prototypes unveiled by Musk last night, greeted with skepticism. When they can navigate 57th Street, where the lines have yet to be painted.
Yes.
Maybe I'll be a believer.
The Bentley was in the garage yesterday. The guy that drove me home, we were on Park, and he did not know where Madison was. Well, I did not get out of the car.
I'm not going to comment.
We will.
But West 57th Street, first they milled it. That took 3 weeks.
Yeah. Well.
Then they paved it, and it's paved, but there are no lines.
And for those that are not in Midtown Manhattan people, this is a major thoroughfare crossing the entire island. You need to get on that.
We'll see. John Tucker, thank you so much. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning brought to you by Cohn-Resnick Advisory. Assurance Tax is your business future-friendly. Talk to Cohn-Resnick's digital advisory team about strategies and platforms to drive competitive advantage. The path from Buffalo to Simon School, University of Rochester, to an incredibly sterling career in fixed income. Leslie Falconio joins us right now. Leslie, I'm just going to cut with UBS, I should say. Leslie, I'm going to cut to the chase. My head's spinning forward. Are you clipping a coupon, or can you really convince me you can generate total return in fixed income?
Most of that total return is going to be by clipping that coupon. It's going to be from carry and yields, right? Our expectation is that 10-year where we are right now, around that 409, next year it's going to be around 380 to 410. Spreads are so incredibly tight given the fact that we're pricing in that soft landing everywhere or even no landing. So it's really going to be to your point about the carry.
So mere mortals calling up UBS with a pot of money, do they say, do we ladder or do we barbell given the demand of coupon?
I think first out, it all depends on your risk, but actually, we're preferring more right now, a bit of that barbell. But, it does. It depends on your risk. I mean, I think that what we're going to see now is a steepening of the yield curve. We still think the yield curve is going to steepen heading into 2025. We still think the Fed cuts twice this year, once every quarter next year, terminal about, 325, 330-ish, which is really where we are right now. So the risk is that those people go over their skis and really take on that lower credit quality that we're seeing right now, and we're not watching their correlations to the equity market and realize if that hard landing does occur, if there is a tail risk, which we're not necessarily calling for, but you need to be mindful of risk assets are tight across the board.
Yep. For those of our audience in front of a Bloomberg terminal, I&Go is the function. And it gives you the Bloomberg Index browser. The best performance in the high yield, in the fixed income space is U.S. corporate high yield, up 7.44%. How did that happen? I thought people were concerned about recessions and things like that.
I think it's twofold. One is that when you look at what's had the biggest rally, if you will, where it's positioned on the curve, the high yield index is about a 3-year, right? So you have that short end that's coming down. Two, at some point in time this year, you had a 7.88%. If you locked that in and clipped it and rolled it, you're doing really well. And secondly, the high yield sector, as we said, is around 290. So you're looking at spreads that we haven't seen since 2007. So the question really becomes, what now? Yeah.
For the kids listening worldwide, I got a lovely note from a student in Switzerland the other day. And for all of you younger, I really want to point out, and Paul knows this, Leslie Falconio, her cadence in her pace is how bond adults talk. They don't talk like general counsel sanitized strategy stuff. They talk in this Cliff Bond way that you learn at Soros, you learn at Oppenheimer, and when you're holding court at UBS, Paul. I mean, this is how adults talk in the business.
I'm trying to learn here. High quality. What's quality mean to you?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that we look at the quality. When people say this, I always find it very interesting. To us, it's investment grade. Sort of like that triple B and above that we think is quality. Now, there's tiering within quality. That's just it. Not every quality is government guaranteed. Okay. So there's tiering within that quality. But when we think about things, sectors that we have a low probability of being downgraded, or more importantly, what you're concerned about in fixed income with your cash flows are defaults. Right, not being downgraded, not spread widening. It's the defaults that you worry about. That impacts your cash flows. So for us, we think about high quality as like that triple B and above.
So I guess in the month of September, John Tucker was reporting that it was, in terms of investment grade, like a record month for new issuance. If I'm Morgan Stanley trying to push some bonds out, do I call you? Are you at the top of my call list? Are you buying this stuff?
We've had the technical tailwind to investment grade corporate has been really large. That's why all the supply has been absorbed. Insurance companies, pension funds, foreign buyers, and retail as well. Ultra high net worth are still buying this. Again, they could lock in fixed income, get a good carry, compound that income and their total return for a asset class that will, give you your principal back at par is pretty attractive.
Yeah.
I think this is completely unknown. And folks, the Bloomberg index is from Lehman and Barclays over the years. I'm thrilled Tom Secunda picked this up. These are the definitive price index.
Yep.
Leslie Falconio, I don't think anyone in the known world understands there's a bull market in corporate bonds. Off of October of 2022, that index is up 17, make it 18% basically 9% per year in bonds. You're in a bull market, like NVIDIA, right?
Absolutely. We absolutely are.
Am I right that people don't know this, that the bond market's in a legit bull market?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, let's be honest. Most people focus on the equity market. Yep. And the fixed income market, the bond market, sort of the hedge or the other. That's right.
Now, I got to get this in. I mean, this is really important. I don't know if you can come back. If you were out of Jenny Cream Ale in Rochester, did you go to Utica Club or did you go to Jenny Beer? Come on, be honest.
Well, I'm not a beer drinker, so I'm probably not the best person to answer that. But I'm not sure. I'll leave it. What do you think? I'll leave it up to your opinion.
Cream
ale. There we go.
Starve. You don't drink the others. You wait to get more cream ale or more 12-horse ale. Leslie Falconio. She's the only one that went to Lake Placid and said, "Oh, this is warmer than Western New York." Leslie Falconio, thank you so much from Buffalo, from the University of Rochester. We love talking to the Simon School. We do that about every 100 or so days as well. Let's get right to it. Red and green in the screen with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, John. Florida residents are continuing to repair the damage caused by Hurricane Milton. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
We've got a lot of rescue craft operational. Hundreds of rescuers are engaged in over 125 missions in 26 counties. Some of that's in conjunction with the local law enforcement and fire and other first responders.
At least 10 people died from Milton. About 2.5 million customers are without power. With just weeks until Election Day, former President Trump says we have to bring back the American dream. In a speech at the Detroit Economic Club, Trump going after his opponent, Kamala Harris, but also insulting the city he was campaigning in.
The whole country is going to be like, you want to know the truth? It'll be like Detroit. Our whole country will end up being like Detroit if she's your president. You're going to have a mess on your hands.
Trump pledged to make interest on car loans fully tax deductible. With both candidates fighting to win Michigan, a critical swing state, Harris pounced.
My opponent, Donald Trump, yet again has trashed another great American city when he was in Detroit, which is just a further piece of evidence on a very long list of why he is unfit to be president of the United States.
And Michigan's Democratic Governor, Gretchen Whitmer, warned you better believe Detroiters won't forget this in November. The Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to Nihon Hideko, the Japanese organization of survivors of the U.S. atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, for its activism against nuclear weapons, the chair of the Norwegian Nobel Committee.
A global movement arose whose members have worked tirelessly to raise awareness about the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of using nuclear weapons.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
Equal opportunity to the Yankees last hour. Okay, batting average, 24th in the MLB. On-base percentage, 29th. I think that's out of 28 teams. Slugging percentage, 22nd. The Detroit Tigers, the powerhouse. I mean, come on, Michael Barr. They're relying totally on Scooball to get it done.
Yes, we are. Come on, Tariq. We need you, man. This is, tomorrow is going to be a beer drinking, eating chicken day.
It is.
I'm going to watch that TV.
It's huge. And the answer is quickly here, Michael. He's got to go long. He's got to go 7-8 innings, doesn't he?
Yeah, because if you don't, there's going to be no tomorrow.
It's like the edge of Jack Morris.
Yep. All hands on
deck.
deck.
It's like Scooball, Jack Morris. This is going to work out. We'll see. That's our tiger discussion for the day, worldwide. Stay with us on a Friday. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. You have S&P futures look like they're starting to steady out right now as the banks, including JPMorgan Chase and Wells Fargo, soothe some of the sentiment with their forecast topping third quarter earnings. JPM CFO just taking questions on the call this morning, calling the quarter, in his words, strong. JPMorgan reported a surprise gain in net interest income for the third quarter. They also raised their forecast for net interest income, a key revenue source, even amid expectations that rates are going to continue to fall. Investment bankers defying estimates there. The fees surged 31%. Wells Fargo posting third quarter profit, topping analyst expectations. There was a surge in investment banking fees. Tesla finally taking the wraps off the self-driving robo-taxi, or at least we know what it's going to look like. The CEO, Musk, unveiling a prototype of the Cybercab he hopes will begin production in 2026 and sell for less than $30,000. Of course, Elon Musk has a kind of a history of making promises that he fails to keep. Tesla shares pre-market, they are down 6%. Investors now going to monitor producer price numbers. We get those in about 13 minutes after yesterday's data showed a strong inflation print, but a sharp rise in jobless claims. Dow futures up 10, S&P E-mini futures down a point. The NASDAQ futures 36 points lower. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
John Tucker, thanks so much. Good morning across the nation on your commute. Thrilled that you're listening to us on Bloomberg Radio. Again, at the office, at home, YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Tell your fam and friends about it as well. Growing every day. We're thrilled with that. In Boston, 92.9 FM. Ooh. Reaching up to Millinocket. It's a balmy 48 degrees in Millinocket this morning. Getting down to the mid-30s this weekend. It may freeze there into next week as well.
Here we go. A crackling fire.
You had a crackling fire.
Crackling fire.
Very good. Joining us from the warm climes of Portland, Gerard Cassidy, head of U.S. Bank Equity Strategy at RBC, definitive on the American banking industry. Gerard, in my opinion, JPMorgan and others, but particularly JPMorgan, are softballing their excellence on a ratio basis. The 10, the 15, the 20 ratios you look at as a pro. Have you ever seen this before from a financial institution?
Tom, you're right. The numbers are incredibly strong. One of the ratios you refer to is their capital ratio, known as the CET1, Common Equity Tier 1 ratio, and it's over 15%, and that's very strong. And you go back to the days when we looked at the banks in the 1980s and early 90s, and the capital levels were nowhere near those levels. And second, not only are the capital levels so strong, Tom, the ROTCE, return on tangible common equity, is extraordinarily high, and they're doing a very good job.
Gerard Cassidy, when I knew you at Tucker Anthony and R.L. Day, that's back when Wheat First was rocking it. I used to read Paul Sweeney folks at Wheat First, but at Tucker Anthony and R.L. Day, Gerard Cassidy used to quill in a pot of ink. That's not the way it is now, Gerard Cassidy. It is JPMorgan lead on technology investment.
They sure do, Tom, as do many of the other large banks. The banking industry as a whole is obviously investing billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, actually, into technology. AI, of course, is the big buzzword, but it's the digital technology. When you think back, Tom, when Apple introduced the iPhone around 2008, and you think how you would do your banking services, and how in as little of 15, 16 years, how that has changed dramatically. And JP Morgan, Bank America, Wells Fargo are all leading the way with digital technology, both for the commercial customer and the consumer customer.
Gerard, I heard some comments this morning from Mr. Diamond, and we'll also hear from Brian Moynihan at Bank of America about what they feel like are some overly onerous, restrictions placed upon them, after the great financial crisis. But despite that, they continue to put up just massive numbers here. Is there an argument to be made that the banks are okay here? You don't have to worry about them being overregulated?
I think one of the challenges that the big banks are seeing when it comes to regulation is that they're now competing more than ever with the so-called shadow banking industry, particularly private credit and private equity. And I think that's where the biggest banks feel that they're more constrained because of being a bank-regulated company and having to adhere to these regulations, capital requirements, liquidity requirements that Apollo, Blackstone, and others don't have to adhere to. That's, I think, their biggest focus right now.
Gerard,
is to try to get better.
You're killing me. I'm trying to get an October lobster roll here out of Cassidy. Come on, Jane Frazier's out front on this. She's doing a deal with Apollo. The big banks are going to co-opt the excellence of private equity, private credit. Is that what you would tell JPMorgan? Just do a deal and co-opt the industry?
They certainly can consider that strategy as well. They certainly have lowered their exposure compared to where they were in this, leveraged lending area, let's say, compared to 2006, as is the industry. Because, as you know, Tom, they go through the stress test every year, and that's where the regulators really keep these banks in check. And the industry, including JPMorgan, have been de-risked, which makes it even a stronger industry as we go forward.
So how about Wells Fargo today? When I think about Wells Fargo, I think about corporate banking, lending to companies across the country, mortgage business, consumer. What'd you see out of Wells Fargo today?
Wells put up very good numbers. One of the areas of concern for Wells recently has been their commercial real estate office portfolio. There was some meaningful deterioration in that portfolio in the past 12 to 18 months, reflecting the weakness in that market, but it's stabilizing. Their credit picture remains very resilient and strong, and they have the asset cap. You might recall they have a cease and desist order from the Federal Reserve that was put in place in February of 2018, and on top of the cease and desist order, they have this asset cap they're trying to have lifted. There seems to be strong indications it could be lifted sometime in 2025.
One of my high points of the week, Gerard Cassidy, was a good conversation with Thomas Show, of course, at Keefe Bruyette and Stifel. And we were talking about the roll-ups of the industry. Give me a bank where they're not worried about going to lunch forever. Give me a smaller bank, Gerard Cassidy, that's in the business of doing the right thing for their shareholders.
Tom, there are many of them, and some of them aren't so small. When you look at some of the bigger regional names like a Fifth Third or Regions RF, but moving down into the smaller names, look at a Wynn Trust out of Chicago doing a very good job of serving their customers in the Chicago market, or Provident Bankshares out of New Jersey. These are companies that are smaller regional banks doing a very good job, and I think you're going to continue to see the smaller regional banks perform well as long as the economy stays in a soft landing, which we're currently in.
Love it. Gerard Cassidy, thank you so much with RBC Capital Markets, Portland, Maine.
Yeah.
I should say. So it's, there's these banks.
I don't get the Maine. I think I've been there twice in my life. I need to get out a little bit more.
Oh, it's fabulous.
I know.
Gura lives there. He commutes.
Yeah. Oh, perfect for him.
Yeah. He's got like 6,000 square feet above Camden.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. I mean, do you know what he does? All of his kids, he's got like 8 kids. I don't know. But Gura sends them all to camp in Maine.
Ah.
And they're doing the whole Time of Wonder, Robert McCloskey thing, running around, looking at lobsters and crayfish and all that. But, that's Maine.
It's hardy folks up
get
there.
Up there. Good morning up in Maine. Good morning on 92.9 FM. Into the climes. In Calais, I think in Calais they're not listening to 92.9.
No.
It's like on the edge of Quebec.
Yeah, okay.
They're listening there in Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as well. On this Friday, I'm really taken back by the JPMorgan report. We'll continue to report on that, stealing as much from Max Abelson as we can, but there's a lot going on here. Joe Mathieu, I believe, attending us again at some point. Just a lot going on. Data. There is economic data. Paul, you're dead on. PPI, EIO, Michigan on the Paul Sweeney, Alex Steele show at 10 a.m. Stay with us on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast, growing every day.
This is breaking news from Bloomberg.
All right, it's breaking. Let's fix it. We are data dependent. It's a measure of inflation at the wholesale level, waiting for the producer price index for the month of September to come out. Ahead of that, futures right now, they're mixed. Dow futures up 8, S&P futures 2 points lower, and the NASDAQ futures, they are down right now 44 points. Now, ahead of this inflation print, 2-year yields about a basis point higher at 3.96. And there you go. PPI month over month. This is for final demand. Coming in less than expected, dead flat, 0 in fact, when you strip out food and energy month over month, coming in a little less than the prior month's reading, right on expectations of a rise of 0.2%. And PPI components, of course, they feed into the Fed's preferred inflation measure, the core PCE deflator, and that we get on October 31st. And we check the markets for you and the data all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is breaking news, PPI. Tom,
John Tucker,
Paul.
thanks so much. Mixed picture, all in all. PPI, ex-food and energy trade, the monthly numbers, maybe a whisper of disinflation, the revision, a whisper of disinflation. But, Paul, then you look at PPI ex EIEIO, food energy trade, year over year. And I'm sorry, there's a sprightly number here. 2.6% was a survey. Wait, previous was 2.4%. The survey was up 2.6%, and the actual statistic was 2.8%.
Yep.
And I got a lot of flash and red and green in the screen, and yields lift a little bit. What do you take from it, Paul?
Kind of a mixed picture here, but I think your initial take, Tom, is kind of where I'm going to go with that. That disinflation that is out there, it's still there. And that's okay here. But the year-over-year number does get your attention here. But the market's looking at the S&P up about 3 points here.
Economic indicators, we don't do it as well as Jennifer Lee of BMO Capital Markets. We'll get to her in a moment. Our economic indicators always brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors who are taking control of their growth. With advisor-centric support and future-ready technologies, grow on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to Commonwealth.com to learn how. And we thank Commonwealth on a Friday for their support of our economics and all that we do. We lean on Jennifer Lee, senior economist, BMO Capital Markets. Last time she was on, she was lights out as well. Which is more important, Jennifer Lee, CPI or PPI?
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me on. I don't know if you should be leaning on me for everything, but I think I'm going to say the CPI is more important. Whatever happens with the PPI doesn't always filter into the consumer price index. So we're always just looking more closely on the CPI and, of course, the core PCE deflator. Right now, I mean, it looks like, we got a little bit ahead of ourselves, perhaps, with the slightly hotter than expected number that we saw yesterday for CPI. And it sort of balanced it out with today's PPI report, at least the headlines that I can see so far. But it shows that, sorry, keep going.
No, I just do the market.
Rambling here.
I know, I want to do the market because it's moving. It's moving in a Brian Belsky way. We are -5, and we're now +4 on futures.
Jen, how do you think our Federal Reserve is going to take in some of this inflation data that we've had over the past couple of days?
I think they're going to take it with a grain of salt. I'll tell you this much. I was sort of prepared for potentially a hotter than expected PPI. And even if it was, and again, with a slightly stronger than expected CPI number, I think the Fed is going to take this with a grain of salt because it's going to take a lot, I think, to get them to change the path that they're on. Do you remember how it took it took like 5 CPI reports in a row to allow Fed Chair Powell to be comfortable and confident to start cutting rates. So it's going to take more than one slightly hotter than expected inflation report to get him to get off that path. It's going to have to be, the bar is quite high for him to not cut, or at least take a pass in November. So we continue to see the Fed continue to cut at a 25 basis point cadence over the next few meetings. I think 50 basis points, this for sure will sort of throw that one
Do you feel like inflation's been whipped here, Jennifer, or do we have to keep an eye on it here?
You're on the edge of Gerald Ford.
I am, exactly.
My word.
Me too. Okay, so I don't know if this is a popular view, but I'm a little bit more cautious on the inflation front, and I point to a number of factors. Longer term. I mean, we do believe that inflation is coming down towards that 2% target, thanks to all those rate hikes that we've seen over the past couple of years. But, as my esteemed colleague Brian Belsky would say, nothing goes down in a straight line, or nothing moves in a straight line. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a choppy move down, because we're still going to potentially see some inflationary pressures, coming from all these tariffs that we've already seen so far. And there's going to be probably more to come. All the longer term impact from climate change, all the wacky weather, the extreme weather that we've been seeing has been really putting pressure on food prices. The labor market, the last jobs report was quite solid, which is interesting. I don't know whether or not that's going to be revised, so that'll be only time will tell. But demographically, we're still seeing a like in terms of working age population is declining, fertility rates are down, so we're going to still see tight labor markets, and of course all the strikes and the impact it could have on wages. So it's a long list, so I'm still a bit worried, I guess. I'm still a bit worried on the inflation side.
You're riding into the weekend, Jennifer Lee, and here, mid-October, I know it's too early, but I want you to frame out Q4 and into Q1 of 2025. The fact is, everybody's gotten wrong real GDP and nominal GDP buoyancy so far this year. Does that continue where we get wrong the growthiness of America?
So we have been cautiously optimistic. We have always been calling for that soft landing. So I don't think we've ever called for a hard recession, and we've been correct so far. But of course, it takes time for things to filter through the economy. And again, over 500 basis points of rate hikes is doing this job right now. So we're seeing the economy slow moderately. We're seeing inflation slow moderately, and it's not going to come crashing down very quickly, but it is coming down. So I think, right now we've seen that gentle breaking of the economic growth so far as we're heading into the fourth quarter, and we'll probably continue to see more of that. But there's still a lot of uncertainty out there, given the things that I just rambled off earlier, and of course, whatever happens after the election and what policies the winning party will be introducing to the table. And that's going to start. We won't have a good idea of that until January.
When you see inflation numbers like we have over the past couple of years and labor numbers like we've seen here, how does that inform kind of your view, Jennifer, of kind of the U.S. consumer these days?
So we always say, never to underestimate the U.S. consumer, and I still believe in that. We may see some month-to-month weaknesses overall, but the U.S. consumer is still in good shape. They've got an over 5% savings rate, for example. You know that the jobs data so far have been still resilient as well. The jobless rate of just over 4%, off the lows, of course, but it's still historically low. And I think that is good news. Wages, we've been averaging about 0.4% average monthly wage growth over the past year, which is still a decent number. So as long as wage growth is strong, is decent, we're still seeing job growth, and there's money coming into one's bank account. I think that leaves the consumer in a good position. They don't have to spend everything right away, but at least they have something for a rainy day that they could spend later.
How do you aggregate your numbers given the polarity of society in America? How do you come to a summed conclusion, given certainly what we see with our politics, the mass polarity, the barbell of America?
It's difficult, but we have to look at things in the aggregate. And again, broadly speaking, we still have strong or resilient U.S. growth, just over 3% in the second quarter. We actually upped our growth forecast just a little bit for this year to just over 2.5%, which is good. I mean, again, after everything that the U.S. economy has gone through, and then we're still raising it, which is good news. And a number of shops I think have been taking away their recession forecast as well. So far, touch wood, it looks like we're in pretty decent shape, but we're going to have to see because a lot of things could happen. There's still a lot of risk out there.
Jennifer, one final question. Thank God the Vikings have a bye week. Has Belsky beaten you over the head talking about Minnesota Vikings? You just stand up and walk out of the room when he gets going?
I will, or I'll just nod. Or I'll roll when he does that.
Brian, it's finally good to see that Minnesota's finally winning. Jennifer Lee, thank you so much. Really valuable. She'll publish this weekend. Look to BMO Capital Markets for important note in that. We don't talk enough about it, Paul, but this is the big missed call. And I love what she's saying here, 2.5%, solid economy. Yep. The gloom crew on economics, on GDP, flat out got it wrong. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah, and I think you probably have to start with the consumer coming in, perhaps a little bit stronger than a lot of
Which
folks.
consumer?
Yeah, I think if you take out, there's this bifurcation out there in the marketplace, maybe even more than a bifurcation, maybe more splits here. The lower end, the folks who don't own assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, they feel and are feeling the inflation much, much more acutely than maybe some of the others.
It'll be interesting to see. They see BitDog up almost 2,000 points, jump there. PPI got a 61,000 on Bitcoin. Doing nice. Gold up $22, $26.61.
Dennis Gartman.
Brent crude $78.82, churning, I will say, into an important weekend in the Eastern Mediterranean. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. Hurricane Milton's devastating path across Florida has left at least 10 dead, millions without power, and destroyed homes and crops. Authorities warned it could take days to assess the full extent of the damages. Meanwhile, the Small Business Administration could have run out of money to fund disaster loans in the wake of Hurricanes Helene and Milton. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
The federal government is offering aid to small businesses that were in Helene and Milton's paths. The SBA is offering disaster loans for small businesses in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. And President Biden says Congress should consider returning to Washington to fund the Small Business Administration.
I think Congress should move as rapidly as they can, particularly on the most immediate need, which is small business.
President Biden also says he anticipates lawmakers will need to top up the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA's, disaster relief program in the coming months as well. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
An Israeli strike against a Hezbollah target in an apartment building in the heart of Beirut killed at least 22 people and injured 117 others, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. And in a separate Israeli military action, a UN source speaking to Reuters say that a United Nations peacekeeping mission in southern Lebanon has been fired on by Israeli forces, injuring 2 peacekeepers. The Israeli military says it is acting in self-defense after Hezbollah fired more than 190 projectiles from Lebanon into northern Israel. The Nobel Peace Prize for 2024 has been awarded to a Japanese organization. It went to the group Nihon Hidenkyo.
This grassroots movement of atomic bomb survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, also known as Hibakusha, is receiving the Peace Prize for its efforts to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons, and for demonstrating through witness testimony that nuclear weapons must never be used again.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Massive victory lap in L.A. where Lisa Mathieu is. Lucas Shaw is holding court. Conversations with Netflix and their future conversations with Brian Roberts of Comcast on what they're doing in streaming, conversations with Stephen A. Smith on sports, and just a simple idea with ESPN's First Take about the view forward for sports. Paul, we can't overestimate the impact Lucas Shaw is having on the zeitgeist, the conversation in your world right now.
He's really carved out a very strong presence out there in the Hollywood community. From a reporting perspective, he's really developed some outstanding sources that inform his reporting, and now he's taken it to another level by really, getting in the middle of some of these really important discussions from some of the leaders out there.
Lucas failed. I mean, let's be honest. The Vikings have a bye week, so they get to rest before they play the Detroit Lions.
Oh, boy.
In 2 weeks. I mean, this is unfair.
Tough.
That's a bigot because you're talking 2 division rivals, man. Hey, Yep. They're undefeated.
I mean, Michael Barr ought to be in L.A. next year for screen time.
Oh, I think so. I think so. No question.
Stephen A. Smith, Michael Barr together.
Put them on a panel. Let them yell at each other.
Lucas Shaw, I believe, I'm making this up, will publish his note this weekend. I'll be sure to get that out across LinkedIn and Twitter. It'll be absolutely definitive here on the state of why I'm canceling subscriptions every weekend at home. Red and green on the screen right now. SPX negative, Dow fractionally positive as well. We're on YouTube. That's our future. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Right now, futures are mixed. Dow futures up 20, S&P futures down just about a point. The NASDAQ futures 49 points lower. The Producer Price Index for the month of September, let's recap. Monthly readings in the headline and some core PPI readings were lower than expected. Year-on-year measure that came in a little higher. The PPI components feed into the Fed's preferred inflation measure. We get that October Halloween, the core PCE deflator. Yesterday's data showed a higher than expected inflation print, but also a sharp rise in jobless claims. Equity futures again bouncing off the session lows as JPMorgan third quarter results. They beat. The bank raised that key metric, net interest income, in its 2024 guidance. Wells Fargo, they beat expectations on profit, as did Bank of New York Mellon. The bank's upbeat start to the earnings season can boost their shares relative to the wider S&P 500. As we look at yields right now, 2-year up 2 basis points, 397. The 10-year 5 basis points higher. That's at 411. We check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. Highlight of the week, Greg Giroux joined from Bloomberg Government, just encyclopedic and the granularity. And he said, at some point, he said, watch Montana. Dave Wasserman and the team, Amy over at Cook Political Report. Here are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 headlines. Wisconsin shifts from lean Democrat to toss-up. Texas shifts lean Republican. Nebraska take all. It could be either way in Nebraska. Nebraska again shifts from solid to likely Republican. And then you got Montana moves lean Republican, GOP increasingly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Joe Mathieu, what does President Harris do with the Republican Senate?
Well, that's a pretty good question. You know, it's interesting when you talk to people on Wall Street, their biggest worry right now seems to be a sweep, not necessarily whether it's Trump or Harris. And it looks like the gridlock might be there for them. You know, all signs point to, you just talked about Cook. We had Jessica Taylor on yesterday who moved that rating in the Wisconsin race. Yeah. But I'll point you as well to Siena College, New York Times. You want to talk about Montana. If you're John Tester right now, you're wondering how you can get a break, because he's running way ahead of Kamala Harris in Montana, but still way behind his opponent. A guy named Tim Sheehy, a former Navy SEAL who's got a good story to tell, and he's winning by 7 points right now. The fact of the matter is, a lot of people had written off Montana, but it's not looking good in Ohio. It's not looking good in Wisconsin. It's not looking good in Texas, as you just said. And we've got this little thing going on in Maryland right now. Larry Hogan just had his first and only debate last night with Angela Also Brooks. I stayed up late to watch this thing, and it is very much in play. So Republicans are feeling real good about the Senate this morning, and John Tester is not.
So to follow up on my question, because we're fair and balanced, unlike you, Joe, you know, I got to ask, if we get a Republican...
Just read that on Twitter.
If we get a Republican Senate, what does it mean for President Trump?
Okay, well, I don't know, because it's likely as well, if you want to play the odds here, that he's going to have a Democratic House. So we just kind of switch sides on Capitol Hill. Speaker Johnson becomes potentially minority leader, and everybody cancels each other out. This, by the way, is more important for Kamala Harris, who needs Congress to enact more of her proposals, than Donald Trump, who wants to go to tariff heaven. He can do that all on his own without the help of the House and Senate. So if you look at it that way, this is actually a bigger deal for the Democrat.
Joe, I saw, I guess, former President Obama is now kind of stepping up his game in support of Kamala Harris.
Kissing babies.
Yeah, I saw that. Does that mean, is that going to move the needle at all?
I don't know. If you listen to what he said last night, I mean, he was admonishing young black men for having trouble, as he put it, with electing a woman to be president. This is something that Kamala Harris cannot say. It's something Joe Biden cannot say. And it runs in the face of this idea that black men are lining up, young black men, for Donald Trump. Look, he's coming on the trail a little later than he did for Joe Biden last time around, but he started last evening in Pittsburgh, and Barack Obama is going to be doing events weekly for the next 4 for Kamala Harris. He's a good surrogate. You know, a lot of people coming off the convention in Chicago thought his speech was the moment. And he does have an ability to talk to people and remind them of what his presidency was all about before we started to get into the Trump era. So, yeah, I think she sees him as one of her most important surrogates traveling the country, up there with Governor Shapiro from Pennsylvania.
And Vice President Harris doing some more media, but I'm not sure anybody's going to call the media outlet she's going to as kind of murderer's row here. So, what's the strategy?
Stern. I think they tried to take a talking point away from Republicans, and they seem to have done that this week. Let's remember, it wasn't just Stern, The View, and Colbert. She did an hour-long 60 Minutes on Monday. True. Like, this was real saturation in the market. But you cover media, Paul. It's not just that. It's the podcast that she's doing. And Donald Trump's doing a lot of these, too. He'll sit down for an hour and a half with some of these guys on YouTube if they're getting to the right audience. This is such a splintered media environment If you want to reach young men, here's the podcast you talk to. If you want to talk to middle-aged women, you go over here. And both campaigns have been pretty shrewd about that.
Joe Mathieu, what are the fossils out there like me? I can remember back AUH2O. Joe doesn't even know what I'm talking about. AUH2O and the rest of it. What do the fossils like me, Joe Mathieu, get most wrong about presidential politics 2024?
It might be the fact that we're looking at old-fashioned polls. I don't think we can answer that until after November, because my 17-year-old keeps coming up to me holding a phone up, and I see a meme or a video about Kamala Harris cooking Chinese food at home. And that's what they talk about tonight. That's how they're getting to young people in a way that they can't get to you and I through the Terminal or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. Whether that actually gets people out to vote, though, remains a question. Are the young people going to key off of that, or are they just having fun talking with their friends? Being able to mobilize those people is going to be the trick for Kamala Harris, just like it is for Trump. I mean, this is a turnout election, guys. It's a one-point race. It depends who shows up.
Vice presidential candidates, are they going to have any impact over the next several weeks?
I don't know. It's a good question. They've got Tim Walz doing a bunch of media as well and trying to talk to young men. J.D. Vance is doing what he can to reinforce Trump. But this is really about the top of the ticket here. I mean, I mentioned earlier, Donald Trump's going to go to Aurora, Colorado. That's going to be what the whole story tonight is, whatever he pulls off there. Kamala Harris is going to be trying to zero in on the hurricane and try to find some sunlight. By the way, Tom said it best. What happens this weekend in the Eastern Mediterranean will take our view away from all of this stuff that we're talking about. And a lot of it will seem like a waste of time, particularly for a candidate who is tied to the incumbent.
Incredibly well said. We've underplayed the Eastern Mediterranean today. What a wonderful week with Admiral Stavridis. To have Richard Haas with us. We got a huge response from the conversation with Ambassador Haas yesterday, and we can't take our eyes off that. We'll really lean into that, I'm sure, Monday morning. Joe Mathieu, try to get some sleep here. I mean, I understand, you're up late watching the Red Sox in the playoffs. Oh, wrong
if
year.
Only, yeah.
But,
hey, we're in the postseason of the election.
That's right.
We're in that. Joe Mathieu, thank you so much.
No, don't worry about me. I have Kaylee Lines. I can just copy off her work.
Okay, that's very good. Joe Mathieu, thank you so much. With Kaylee Lines, balance of power is well. Paul, we recalibrate. I can't think of two inflation reports more snooze-festy than Thursday and Friday. And I think a lot of research this week, and our good guess, those bullish, those bearish, they have to discuss this. What's the trend in place? I thought Jennifer Lee was brilliant.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then, I'm just looking at this in the headline, they were talking about gasoline costs, and John Tucker and I know they've come down dramatically over the past several months. But now we've seen this turn up in oil coming out of the Mideast tensions over the last 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. That maybe, U.S. consumers are going to see a tick up in gasoline prices. Hope to see how that plays.
Going to earnings, I think the big unspoken this week, and it's not my area. I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about, but the relative strength of NVIDIA this week has been underreported.
It seems like a little bit of that AI trade, which had faded a little bit for some people. Maybe that's
or
coming
relative
back
trade where AMD was challenged, to say the least, on something. So where's Mandeep and Anurag? They take Fridays off?
Yeah, I mean,
tech guys?
Now they're out there writing some research that'll drop on Monday.
Sassauer's work from home today?
Is he? Well, it's a nice golf day.
It's a perfect day. I think with the wind is still, he can probably get another 8-10 yards off the third hole by now.
Ocean was like a lake yesterday. That's how calm it was.
Sweeney had a tantrum as people channeled it to me. New Jersey music. Bruce made an endorsement. Will James Dimon make an endorsement?
Right.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mathieu on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Lisa Mathieu on the Gulf Stream, Michael Barr with us, and John Tucker with us as well. Good to have John Tucker with us through the entire week. I mean, 5 days in a row. First Friday's work since time began. John Tucker, good to have you with us. Really interesting day, and I've repeated this, but I think it really bears repeating here with futures -2. The VIX 20.86. I mean, Jamie Dimon did the interview with Lisa Abramowitz.
Yep.
Techie this, techie that. Minting money, is that I look at the ratios, which we talked about with Gerard Cassidy and with Allison Williams. These are ratios, Paul, you and I never studied in textbooks.
Well, these were some of these returns I'm seeing here. I wasn't sure I was going to see these returns again from some of these big financial institutions after the great financial crisis, and they've had to deal with so many more of these regulations, but they're figuring out a way.
With the Bloomberg Business Flash right now, John Tucker joins us. John, good morning.
All right, good morning. Markets barely budged after we had that data, the produced price index for final demand, flat in September. Declines in gasoline suggesting further progress toward tamer inflation. Treasuries seeing just small losses across the curve. The yield on the 30-year bond hitting the highest since July. Dollar, that's fluctuating. And, of course, JPMorgan Chase reporting a surprise gain in net interest income for the third quarter, raising its forecast for the key revenue source. JPMorgan shares, they are up pre-market 1.7%. Wells Fargo is up 3.5%. They posted a third quarter profit that topped analyst expectations with a surge in investment banking fees. I'm told I'm going too long. Dow futures down 10, S&P futures down 3, the NASDAQ futures down 53. I mean, I could keep this really short if you want. Back to you guys.
You're in charge.
Michael,
John Tucker's in charge. I don't know why.
John Tucker, thanks so much. Dollar churning as well. Joining us now, Chloe Feynman was okay on Saturday Night Live, but she was no Margaret Brennan. Joining us now, of course, the host of Face the Nation, coming off the debate. Margaret Brennan joins us here in this key election season. Margaret, I'm going to cut to the political chase. Cook Political Report, Greg Giroux at Bloomberg. They all say there's way too many congressional races going leanish Republican You have Mike Johnson on Face the Nation on Sunday. How lean Republican is the Speaker of the House?
He is fighting around the country for Republicans to stay competitive, to try to hold on to the House and hold on to his job when he's got a very narrow margin as is. But we need to talk to him more immediately about what's happening with federal funding for FEMA, specifically for the Small Business Association or small business funding that President Biden said Congress needs to come back to authorize more funding to help with this hurricane recovery effort in Florida and North Carolina. That's where I imagine most of our conversation will be.
You do this better, Margaret, than I do. How does FEMA run out of money? Doesn't somebody just, go to the grant room at the Secretary of Treasury and get some gold out? You got to be kidding me. How do they run out of money?
Well, FEMA says they have money to deal right now with these two storms, but hurricane season takes you through November 30th. And because of the scale of what hit North Carolina, hitting areas that aren't beachfront property, right? All the way inland in Asheville, North Carolina, where they had a tremendous flooding, that kind of fiercer storm, whatever you believe the cause is, certainly scientists say the warming of the planet has added to the ferocity of these storms, that means you have to be able to have the resources to take you all the way through November 30th. And remember, right now we're dealing with a continuing resolution. The lawmakers haven't fully planned forward. They've just been doing these patchwork funding mechanisms. So Speaker Johnson is being pressed by certainly members in the Senate to come back. We had Tom Tillis, a Republican from North Carolina, on air last Sunday saying, look, North Carolina's hit. I want people to come back, but Florida's about to get walloped, and we're not through the season yet. So there is some call for forward planning instead of just, figuring it out after we get hit.
Margaret, I know you also have Representative Maxwell Frost. He's a Democrat from Republican. I think he might be the first Gen Z to serve in Congress. Right. What's the discussion there, obviously, post-hurricane?
That's right. He is one of the youngest, if not the youngest, members of Congress. He represents the Orlando area. We want to talk to him about, again, the impact of the storm, not an area that traditionally is thought of as in the path of a hurricane necessarily. We want to talk to him about what his state needs. Also, he's a surrogate for the Harris campaign, which is concerned about driving up enthusiasm and turnout among Black men in particular, and making sure young people show up to vote in November. So we're going to talk to him about campaign 2024 as well.
Margaret, I've got to go to the Eastern Mediterranean. This is a wheelhouse. You provided huge journalism out of Tunisia a long time ago. It is just a crucible this weekend of tension led by, and folks, this is just an immediate news where the leadership of Saudi Arabia is meeting with Iran very visibly as well. Margaret, your update on how you'll treat this on Face the Nation this weekend.
We will. We're watching closely for what Israel's decision will be in terms of when it chooses to, again, retaliate against Iran for that 180 missile attack that happened October 1st. We are in the middle of the Jewish holidays. It's not clear how much that will affect timing of the decisions, but we know that the United States has upwards of 40,000 troops in the region, that President Biden has surged assets to try to back up Israel here. And so there is a deep concern within the administration that they will be given more than a 20 minutes heads up, which is all Israel gave them for the last two operations.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, particularly given the U.S. personnel at risk and the assumption that the United States will have Israel's back no matter what. So there's a lot of scrutiny in Washington of exactly what the decision-making will be in Jerusalem in the coming days.
So, Margaret, just on the broader picture there of the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, what's the feeling within Washington about that, how that maybe has devolved over the last year or two?
Well, it was interesting. You saw this come up in the interview my colleague Bill Whitaker did with Vice President Kamala Harris pressing on this, and her answer speaks to, or what she wouldn't say speaks to the tension there. The U.S. and Israeli intelligence assets, military, all of that works very closely together, and that partnership is very, very tight. It is the political choices made by Prime Minister Netanyahu that have really turned this issue that used to be bipartisan into a very hyper-partisan one in our current fractured political environment here in the United States. That is not in a good place. And you saw in reporting from Bob Woodward and others just the degree of concern there is that despite receiving the majority of its funding and weaponry from the United States, that the U.S. Council isn't as regarded as perhaps the president would like it to be.
Well said, Margaret Brennan. Thank you so much. And of course, I thought Mr. Woodward's book was bipartisan in its fracturedness,
right?
To say the least. Margaret Brennan, of course, Face the Nation this Sunday across the CBS television network. You can listen to Face the Nation, of course, on Bloomberg Radio. Face the Nation Sunday, 2 p.m. in New York, Washington D.C. Bloomberg 92.9 FM in Boston. Face the Nation, 2 p.m. Bloomberg Radio this Sunday. I thought the work the team did, Paul, this week in giving us good conversation on our foreign policy was really a true to us, including some really important stuff on China.
And this will be an important weekend in China, Tom. I mean, the Chinese government's going to meet tomorrow.
They're going to deliver a plan.
And they're going to deliver a plan.
Right.
And the question is for a lot of folks that look to that part of the world is how much fiscal stimulus will the Chinese government provide for their economy? And the magnitude.
It's not just the announcement. It's like the how much-itness of it.
Yep. So that'll be breaking news tomorrow, which Bloomberg News will be all over, of course.
The tape here, -2. It was red, then green, then, just vacillating here. Just I'm going to call it unchanged here as things go. The VIX 20.85. In the yield space, the Sweeney yield getting up near 4%, 3.97%. There's a new breakout in the 10-year yield, up 4 basis points. We had 409, a Beach Boys number, 410. 4.10 on the 10-year. How about that mortgage rate, Paul?
I know. It's
so much for the
refi. The grand refi of the estate on the Jersey Shore. It's going to have to wait a little bit.
We'll have to see this. Can we just say, for Lisa Mathieu, Paul Sweeney, and myself, just killing it this weekend with the news flow was Michael Barr.
Yeah,
I mean, he's just, you don't see it, folks, but he's got a turret with 3, it's like a separate office with 3 Bloombergs lined up and everything coming up as we aggregate the news worldwide. And I think Barr's aged this week. It's just sort of...
Well, he's got he's still rooting on his Tigers. I mean, he's got...
Yeah, he's getting no sleep. Yeah, he's up all night watching the Tigers, see who else they'll play. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. Florida residents are repairing the damage caused by Hurricane Milton and cleaning up debris. The storm smashed through coastal communities, tore homes to pieces, flooded streets, and spawned a barrage of deadly tornadoes. At least 10 people are dead, but many are relieved Milton wasn't worse. The hurricane spared Tampa a direct hit, and the lethal storm surge that scientists feared never materialized. However, St. Petersburg Police Chief Anthony Holloway has some advice.
We still have a huge power outage, so we're trying to tell people just to drive slowly and to make sure they're watching out for each other.
Chief Holloway spoke to ABC. The state's vital tourism industry is beginning to return to normal. Florida theme parks, including Walt Disney World, Universal Orlando, and SeaWorld, plan to reopen today. The presidential campaigns are heading into the weekend on 2 very different tracks. As Bloomberg's Joe Mathieu reports, former President Trump is heading to a Democratic state today with a stop in Aurora, Colorado.
Donald Trump today wants to talk about Venezuelan gangs taking over a town most Americans have not heard of. Kamala Harris is going to be getting briefed by FEMA today and talking about damage estimates and hurricane disaster recovery. The fact is, both seem to be working. This is a tied race. It's a 1-point race in every state that counts, maybe not Minnesota.
Bloomberg's Joe Mathieu in Washington, and a brand new Wall Street Journal swing state poll shows Trump with a 1-point lead over Harris in the 7 battleground states. Each state is within the poll's margin of error. Secretary of State Antony Blinken told Southeast Asian leaders today that the U.S. is concerned about China's increasingly dangerous and unlawful activities in the disputed South China Sea. During an annual summit meeting, Blinken pledged the U.S. will continue to uphold freedom of navigation in the vital sea trade. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
Michael, thanks so much. JPMorgan's giving it back a little bit. Dr. Max, he's like Dr. Phil. I mean, Max Abelson's out there on T-Live, quote, "To my ears, Mr. Diamond is answering these last few questions with a tone that's veering between annoyed, confident, impatient." That sounds like Mrs. Barr.
Exactly.
When the Detroit Lions are on TV.
We're watching the 49ers for the past couple of weeks.
Annoyed, confident, and impatient. They're talking about private credit. Gerard Cassidy's on the call, who just joined us. And, Jamie, parentheses, still notably irritated. This is a long way from Jack Grubman and AT&T, isn't it?
Exactly. Back in the day. So now it's all about JPMorgan. Maybe JPMorgan's a new tech company here.
We'll have to see. It's on private credit, and I'm sure they're really going at it. You'll see it in the research notes, including with Allison Williams, Bloomberg Intelligence. Thanks to Max Abel, Dr. Max. I'm going to start calling him Dr. Max. He's sensitive like that. Futures at -4. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg newsroom. The futures report being brought to you by IBKR. Markets never sleep, neither does the Interactive Brokers. Discover opportunities with CME Group futures across equity indexes, interest rates, FX, energy, and more. Access CME futures around the clock at Interactive Brokers. JPMorgan Chase reporting a surprise gain in net interest income for the third quarter, raising its forecast for that key revenue source. Shares, though, in the pre-market, they've now turned lower. On the call, Jamie Dimon just said, "I think we spend too much time on that metric." Wells Fargo up 3.2%. They posted third quarter profit, topping analysts' expectations. A surge in investment banking fees there. Bank of New York Mellon's third quarter profit, topping expectations. Elon Musk unveiling Tesla's highly anticipated self-driving taxi at a flashy event that was kind of light on specifics. Tesla most active, it was down about 6%. And further progress toward tamer inflation measure, prices paid to U.S. producers unchanged in September, restrained by a decline in gasoline. S&P futures down 4, Dow futures down 16. NASDAQ futures 60 points lower. Michael Barr's tip for seeing the northern lights: have more than one cocktail.
It works.
It works. Start to see lots of things. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash, Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. She is the hardest person to get at Bloomberg. You talk to her people, and it's just insane.
She has people.
Why is this? 10 years at Newsday, absolutely definitive on the coverage of criminal court at the federal courthouse. criminal and civil court, I should say, at the federal courthouse in New York, and giving us so much at Bloomberg for well over a decade. Patricia Hurtado joins us right now. We say good morning to Bloomberg 1130 in the tri-state area, but to all of you nationwide. Patricia, I've never seen this. I guess there's been other scandals, from Wilbur Mills and a fountain to what we have now in New York City. What's the original feature of this set of announcements by City Hall?
Well, it's just incredible, because I've joked that I'm almost want to be like Carrie in Homeland with this giant wall mount with strings going from people to people, because there's just so much
Right.
to keep track of. And it's extraordinary when you think at a time, when I started out in journalism in New York, I actually covered City Hall. And I was there when Mayor Koch was embroiled in the city scandal, and everyone at the time, from Jimmy Breslin to Murray Kempton, were appalled at this kind of criminality that was, emanating of the corruption at City Hall and in city politics. But now, if you see what we're looking at now, it's extraordinary that the feds have already clamped down on our mayor. It's an unbelievable turmoil,
Right.
too, it's provoked in the city.
In the delicacies of all this, folks, and I want to be very clear that this is Bloomberg Radio, and we noticed the public service of Michael Bloomberg years ago. What is the color and tone away from the headlines, Patricia Hurtado? Was this set of announcements a surprise, narrowed down to Mayor Adams, or did it come with behavior before Mayor Adams?
It seems to have come from the origination, some people have suggested, came from an earlier federal investigation involving, fraud and payola in a prior group of people that were brought by the Southern District of New York. And one of the people implicated as an uncharged co-conspirator was Philip Banks. So as a result of hiring him, the mayor hires him and puts him in his administration despite this possible taint. Many thought that maybe the feds were annoyed or concerned that he would just go ahead and willfully hire someone who had such a questionable background.
So, Patricia, it seems like every day we see news crossing tape of yet another senior administration official, NYC administration official, stepping down for whatever reason. To what extent is this leadership, I guess, volatility, is it impacting day-to-day workings of the government in the city of New York?
Well, the mayor insists it's not affecting it. It's, however thousands of employees of the city, that this is just another day of change, with people move on and go to other positions, as is rumored to be about the current interim police commissioner. I think that there is a lot of concern from people. It appears that if we can understand from what the evidence we've seen so far, or the allegations made by the government so far, some people are, deleting apps on their phones and considering, actions, and they're possibly concerned about getting implicated in this case. So, if people are behaving in a more restrained way because they're afraid of having to flip against the mayor, that might be an issue.
What is the Patricia Hurtado timeline? You've been doing this time and time again, and I guess there's some original features here. If we assume people are innocent until proven guilty, when do we see evidence, process, the procedure to get out to where they decide innocence or guilty?
I think what people have suggested to me is it is an unusual tenor of this investigation where they charge the mayor. If you want to think of, when they bring charges against an insider trading scheme, and they may go for the top guy, and then they may go for the lower level guy and flip them against the upper echelons.
Is that happening right now?
It doesn't look like that, because what they've done is they've gone after the mayor himself, which is extraordinary. I've heard rumors that other people are to be charged. Certainly, there's at least 5 different investigations, including by the Eastern District of New York. The Southern District has several investigations, and now we hear that Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg has got his own investigation.
Patricia, you studied Shakespeare at Harvard. I knew you never thought you'd be doing this.
No.
But seriously, you own the high ground on this. Ms. Hurtado? And the answer is, I, as an amateur, have never seen this. What's the closest equivalent of this set of, I believe you said, 5 investigations to something else across this nation?
Well, I can't think of one. And I mean, like, I covered, like I said, I covered part of the city scandal, and there were at least 3 discrete criminal investigations tied to Mayor Koch. If you guys remember, Donald Manis was the Queensborough president. I covered a later corruption case tied to Donald Manis. He committed suicide because he got implicated, and they found him on the Grand Central Parkway, and he tried to slit his wrists. That was tied to a role of trying to buy cable and get cable contracts. But there was also the Parking Violations Bureau. That was just like two different separate criminal frauds. This one is allegedly 5 or maybe 6 or 7. So, I mean, it's very unusual. But then you have the tenor of the people that are involved, that work for the administration, people married to each other, brothers, siblings. It's kind of a gnarly knot to untie.
What happens to, real quickly, the mayor here? Is there any talk of him stepping down?
He has insisted he will not. It may become more difficult as he gets more mired in the criminal prosecution. Right now, he got indicted, and his lawyers are going to make motions, and have already made bids to have the bribery charges tossed. But the government's threatening to indict him on superseding charges, to bring a revised indictment, adding possibly more people. As more and more people come in, possibly getting charged, possibly pleading guilty, it may be more difficult for him to stay in office and say innocent until proven guilty when he's busy fighting in court.
Patricia Hurtado, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you from all at Bloomberg for your news judgment here. Patricia Hurtado, legendary at the federal courthouse in Brooklyn in southern Manhattan as well. Paul, my head is spinning over this. I'm a complete amateur on this.
No, and
I don't even, anything I would say has no value whatsoever.
Yeah,
it's just my head is spinning after what we just heard.
I agree with you, Tom. And it seems like every day that a senior member of the administration
there's somebody else
is stepping down, resigning, however you want to flag it.
Crane's Business has done a great job. I get an email thing, and it's from Bloomberg or it's from Crane's. It's like 2 p.m. Oh, another. Like literally every day, folks. Thank you for that worldwide and nationwide. We wanted to focus on that for Bloomberg 1130 in New York. Red and green on the screen now. The VIX. It's got a Friday feel. I mean, it's got a beverage at the beach feel for Paul Sweeney. Stay with us now. We need to get the markets open from New York City. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with your Bloomberg Business Flash, waiting for the opening bell here at the New York Stock Exchange. Ahead of that, we have the start of bank earnings season with JPM reporting a surprise gain in net interest income for the third quarter. And also the economic data measure prices paid to producers unchanged in the month of September. Right out of the gate, S&P 500 2 points slower. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is 80 points higher. JPMorgan Chase shares, they are up 1.5% in the early going. Wells Fargo shares, they're up 3.8% if their earnings report, and BNY Mellon shares a full 1% higher. Tesla, after unveiling the prototype for the taxi, down 8.5%
8.5. It's down
right
6% earlier. Wow.
Yeah. NASDAQ 100 out of the gate down 0.4%. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. And that's the opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Out on YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast Advantage Worldwide Live Chat, which they came to me and they said live chat. I said, I don't do live chat. It's really
All
interesting.
over that.
Here's someone moments ago. Paul, I don't know what to do with this live chat. Double John Tucker's time slot.
Boom. There you go. That's the people talking, Tom.
The people are
let's
talking
get some
to us.
pushback from John Tucker. No, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Doing plenty.
Thank you for that. Oh, it's your lawyer that just. I didn't know that, John.
My secret agent.
John Tucker, thank you so much. A little green on the screen, maybe popped the market off of what we saw. It was futures. This is a really timely Friday. It's a beautiful October day in New York. And Simona Makuta has from State Street a brilliant single line in her essay. Quote, "But that is further down the line." Simona, that so nails where we are. How further down the line do we need to go to get clarity on, let's say, a mid-2025 vision?
Honestly, I think we might find ourselves in the middle of 2025 and still wonder what lies ahead, because so many things are in motion on every corner of policy, not just monetary, which we are talking about a lot nowadays, but fiscal. So I'm not particularly hopeful that there will come such a day where we kind of all know clearly the skies are clear, but the road ahead is not.
What does the Fed do? My reading of Fed history is when things are further down the line, they wait. Can they wait by doing nothing on rates? See, that was poetic. You see how I did that? That's pretty good.
No, I do think this process of calibrating interest rates lower needs to continue, but it does not need to go in big steps, right? We had that 50 basis points in September. In retrospect, was it necessarily? Probably not. Is it acceptable? Yes. Do we need another one? No. But is it a good idea to continue at smaller steps? And we do anticipate 25 basis point cuts in November and also in December. Yes, certainly, I believe so. Why, you may ask? Well, two things. Inflation is definitely coming down, and we may, split the hairs and read whether it's a 0.2 or a 0.1 or even a 0.3, but the trajectory is towards target, right? Headline is 2.4, core PCE is, in the 2.5 to 6 range. It's not where it's been, right? So therefore, the interest rate doesn't need to be where it's been. And the labor market, that's the other part of it. It's not as strong as it was. So it does make sense to continue gradually lowering rates.
I mean, Paul, I nailed it. A couple days ago, I said meat prices are ridiculous.
Yeah.
Stephen Stanley, Santander, looking for, steady as we go 25 beats. Quote, meat prices surged, which will feed through to future CPI reports.
Just have more cows. What's the problem here? Even though, you write, Simona, even though we have been arguing for a summer start to cut, September's decision felt rushed and somewhat panicky and seemed to go against the recent data flow. Is that because perhaps this is a Fed that historically and to this day looks at, I guess, backward-looking data, and that's why maybe they're always chasing the data?
I have to say there has been a little bit of relegation of the forecasting function. At least I perceive it that way. And an over-focus on the latest data. And unfortunately, we live in a world where that data gets revised substantially. There are movements, right? We are still in a business cycle like no other and trying to normalize the economy. So that carries risks. And I think, as I said, we were thinking the time to begin cutting gradually was in the summer, June, July. That didn't happen. And then we came to September. And I think there was a degree of questioning whether they should have started earlier. And maybe the outcome of that was, well, we didn't, but we are taking a bigger step and we end up in the same place.
So putting it all together here, what's your call in the economy here? A lot of folks can tell you a pretty Goldilocks economy with, decent growth, moderating inflation, and that's all I need to know. How do you think about it?
I honestly share that view, and that's been our view for a while, holding on to this soft landing narrative, and which was partly also why we said, well, the soft landing starts by itself, but at some point it needs to be a little nurtured by lower interest rates. So actually we continue to believe in that as a baseline scenario. There is so much risk out there, right? So I think you have to realize that it may be a soft landing, but it's going to feel very uncomfortable. I think over the next few months, we'll all be looking our shoulder, wondering, is the recession coming? The data don't suggest it. And now with the Fed in a more, open-minded, easing path, I think that actually is a positive.
But Simona, we've been wrong for, I'm going to say collegially, 18 months. Claudius, correct me if I'm wrong, but you say that we're going to wait for the recession to coming. Where in Y equals C plus I plus G plus NX do you see 2 quarters of negative GDP? Where do you see that?
Well, I don't see it. That's the thing. Our baseline forecast is for a soft landing. We do not have a recession in the forecast. In fact, we haven't had one. But we have lived in this perpetual fear of recession, and I think that will continue. One thing we often forget, we focus on what the Fed will do. We focus on what the government will do. We forget sometimes that there is things that the BEA with the revision does to the data and our understanding of the economy. And one huge revision recently was to income and to the personal savings rate. Right. So we thought that was around 3, now it's actually on 5. That extends the runway to the soft landing. And to your point, it doesn't make it obvious where that recession exactly will come from in the near term, hence the soft landing.
Simona, thank you so much. We got to go to market news, but I really appreciate it. Just brilliant. Down the line. Love that concept. She'll write for State Street Global here. Simona Makuta, chief economist. It's Tracy. JPMorgan, they were up a little bit, and then they pulled back, and they were worried about the conference call. And Dr. Max told me Jamie was irritable. Mm-hmm. Look at JPMorgan.
Sure.
It's up $8.
Yep, 3.9%, $220. It's got a market cap of $630 billion, Tom.
On a standard, pros go to standard deviation, folks. You ready, Paul? I'm modeling. Max Abelson can't do this. It's unbelievable.
He went to Yale. They don't do numbers.
I just fitted the standard deviation leap to 220 on JP Morgan. It is in its recent volatility range, going back to September 9, it is up 3.4 standard deviations.
Yep.
That's like a jump condition.
That's a jump condition. Stock's up 30% year to date, Tom, up 50%, 50 on a trailing 12-month basis.
So you're not going to find that analysis with Max Abelson.
No, please.
He's
a pretty good writer, though.
Dr. Max is good. He's worried about an irritable Jamie.
Yep.
JP Morgan up $8, 220. That is a wow statistic this morning. Where are we here? Oh, I see. We have to go to, did you see the Tucker out on live chat gets hearts like Lisa?
He does.
When Tucker comes on, they get the little heartsy thing like Lisa gets.
How do we monetize that?
Me and Michael Barr, we never get hearts. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. Digging out, cleaning up, and rebuilding much of Florida's coastal communities. It will take months following Milton's mess. At least 10 people are dead. About 2.5 million homes and businesses are still without power. The Pentagon says active duty troops and capabilities remain on standby should they be needed to help in Florida following Hurricane Milton. But Pentagon spokesman Major General Pat Ryder says they haven't been requested yet by Florida or FEMA.
The Florida National Guard has activated more than 6,500 guardsmen and mobilized 500 plus high water vehicles, 26 helicopters, and more than a dozen watercraft from a dozen states.
Pentagon spokesman Major General Pat Ryder. Former President Barack Obama has been campaigning for Vice President Kamala Harris in the lead up to the election. Yesterday, Obama made a stop at a Harris campaign office in Pennsylvania and listened as he offered some tough talk, including sexism.
I'm speaking to men directly. Part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for them.
Meanwhile, former President Trump courted the auto industry, speaking at the Detroit Economic Club.
I intend for the triumph of the American auto industry to be among my greatest legacies. I want it to be a legacy.
Trump also went after his opponent, Kamala Harris, but insulted the city he was campaigning in.
Our whole country will end up being like Detroit if she's your president. You're going to have a mess on your hands.
With both candidates fighting to win Michigan, a critical swing state, Harris pounced.
My opponent, Donald Trump, yet again has trashed another great American city when he was in Detroit, which is just a further piece of evidence on a very long list of why he is unfit to be president of the United States.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
I love this, though. Thanks so much. Just have more cows. Ag economist Paul Sweeney there.
Yeah.
And as to the microeconomic foundations that, we try to talk about on surveillance, but is maybe missing on the view from 60,000 feet. And you wonder there was food inflation in the CPI yesterday.
Yep.
I can't remember who noted that, but that's a big deal.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I mean, you can go GLCO, Tom, the global commodity price. I mean, they got all kinds of livestock there. Feeder cattle up 13% year to date for CME feeder cattle. Live cattle up 9%. Lean hogs, Tom.
Lean hogs
up 23.5%.
Do they give you lean bacon?
No, I don't have that. I'm looking for pork bellies. But
some bacon that was blessed by somebody in Pennsylvania at an organic farm the other day. There was no meat on it.
No meat, just.
I mean, it was like, what it cost. It was just terrible. By popular demand, we have to go to John Tucker. I mean, the producers are in my ear. We need more Tucker on here right now. Can we get an update on the congestion? You are surveillance congestion correspondent. How's the tunnel going to New Jersey, the construction project?
No, there's no construction going to New Jersey. You're talking about the train tunnel.
Yeah, the new tunnel. The new tunnel.
They haven't gotten to the river yet, but
they haven't gotten to the river yet. But one of the big pieces was the replacement of what's called the Portal Drawbridge that spans the Hackensack River in Kearney, and that I would say about 3/4 complete.
Yeah.
Basically, it was an old bridge,
it was
a turnstile bridge.
Like Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, it was at least over 100 years old. It did have some wooden gears still in place, and it would get stuck, and the northeast quarter would be jammed up. But so they're spanning the river.
You have to send some guy out there with like a wrench and bang on it a little bit to get it to close. And
usually that was Paul who they'd send out every morning to do that. Yes. But that's on track, and then the tunnel under the Hudson River, that's the big piece. That's not going to be done until, Paul and I are dead.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're still waiting.
Oh, look, you got 3 more hearts. I like that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's a lot of money they're spending.
Lisa, get back here as quickly as you can. Cy is saying that's enough for John Tucker for the rest of October. And we thank him for that. Very importantly, the tape showing some sogginess on futures. That reverses here at 9:43 Wall Street time. We've got some nice green in the screen. Dow up 0.4%. Got to be JPMorgan helping that out. JPMorgan was up $8, now up $7. Nice lift there to the market. The VIX comes in 20.60. From New York City on the John Tucker Network, it's Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Major stock average mixed in the early going. You have 8 of the 11 major groups in the S&P 500. They are higher right now. And leading the way, the financials. JPMorgan shares up about 3% after their earnings this morning. And then you have Wells Fargo shares right now. They are up 4.6% after their earnings report. The worst performing stock in the S&P 500, that belongs to Tesla. Those shares down 8.6%. The unveiling of the robotaxi, well, we can say that fell flat. Top of the hour, more data, University of Michigan Sentiment Index. As for treasuries, some mild losses across the curve. Yield on the 30-year bonds hitting the highest since July. Right now, the S&P 500, 10 points higher. That's up 0.2%. 5790 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 181 points. That's a rise of 0.4%. The NASDAQ 100, 53 points lower. That is down 0.2%. Let's do crude. NYMEX crude, U.S. crude down 0.7%, 75.30 a barrel. Brent crude, the international benchmark, that is down 0.7%, 78.85. And we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. Joining us now with Harvard. Of course, we got the game on Bloomberg Radio Boston coming up here this weekend. Andrew Orrick joins us, Harvard football head coach. And Andrew, I can see the beard is happening. But after economics major Ryan Fitzpatrick, he had an NFL career, played with every team.
That's a beard.
He just signed a gajillion-dollar deal with Amazon Prime's Thursday Night Football. Coach Orrick, are we growing our beard out like the coiffed Ryan Fitzpatrick?
I can't get it to grow that nicely, so I got to keep it a little shorter and keep it tight.
Hey, Coach, you had a big win last week. You beat number 16 New Hampshire. Just tell us real quickly about that game.
Yeah, we faced some adversity early on. They went up 10-0, but our defense had done a really good job on those first 2 drives to get them to play how they had not been playing, which was they were getting a lot of big plays. And I knew we were in good shape, and our offense kind of got things going. And really, it was all 3 phases had different impacts on the game in a positive way. And we got to the end, and we needed to, basically kill the last 5 minutes of the game running the ball, and we were able to successfully.
Did you see him itching his beard?
Yeah.
He was just itching his beard. He is growing the Fitzpatrick look.
That'd be a good look. All right, Coach, you're in Ithaca, New York. Cornell tonight. I think the Big Red is 1-2, but they're 1-0 in the Ivy. What do you see in Cornell this year?
Yeah, they're a much improved team. They have a new head coach, and you could see, how they've changed and improved since last season. Offensively, their quarterback, Jamison Wang, is probably one of the best, if not the best quarterbacks in the Ivy League. And he has a really good group of receivers that, the head coach there is an offensive guy. So it's schematically challenging just with all the different stuff they do and the tempo they play. And then defensively, they do a lot of different things, which makes it hard to prepare for them because you got to practice first. There's a lot of different looks. And special teams wise, they are a solid group.
This Ivy League, they're on ESPN2 tonight.
Yeah, I know.
Harvard,
it's
Cornell game.
showtime.
How about that?
Coach Orrick, do the kids play different when they know they're on ESPN2, like national ball?
You know what? We had this conversation. I had it with a couple of the players, and I was like, "Do you guys feel any different?" They're like, "No. All our games are basically on ESPN Plus, so it won't feel any different like when you get out there because it's going to have the same type of TV crew that would be at any other game."
Yeah.
I'm sure some of them are feeling that way. Just to be a couple more eyes on them for sure.
Right. I mean, the stereotype here of Ivy League football is Columbia hasn't won a game since Nixon was president, and Princeton is always competing. It's like, Coach, am I right that Ivy League is flipped on its head this year? Columbia is actually executing, and Princeton can't get out of their way?
Yeah, I mean, I had been out of the Ivy League for 4 years, and when I came back, like the parity in the league, it's very even. The talent levels are even across the board, which makes it even more important that you're developing your players the right way so you can maximize their potential. And then as coaches, you got to be on point because schematically, you got to be able to have an advantage.
So, Coach, what we've seen in college football over the last several years has just been a complete upheaval with all the realignment and the economics changing with name, image, and likeness. To what extent, if any, has any of that stuff impacted Ivy League football?
Yeah, it hasn't really impacted it whatsoever. I mean, name, image, and likeness exists, but it's on a different scale than you see at those higher levels. And that's what the Ivy League, hangs its hat on, is that we are the truest form of college football.
Okay, if you can't grow a beard like Ryan, just do a ZZ Top thing. I think that'll work in Cambridge.
Okay.
Coach, go get him.
I don't think I can grow up before next week, but I'll try.
Okay, but just work on it. It can be a project out to Yale football. The coach of Harvard football, Andrew Orrick, with us here. Paul, you mentioned tonight, 6 p.m., right?
Yeah, absolutely.
6 p.m. tonight on ESPN2, and you can hear the game on 92.9 FM in Boston. Looking forward to that. And, they do the pre-games, but, the Ivy League is so parochial that it's like the season started with Brown. They lost to Brown. But like Cornell, then they play. Columbia's no pushover.
No.
Anymore.
And as Coach Orrick was saying, there's a lot more parity in the Ivy League now. I think it's just more talent out there, period. And so the Ivy League's getting its share.
Rounded up, Dow, and I'm being irresponsible here, but hey, it's Friday. The mimosas, John Tucker, you brought in were great.
Yep.
43,000.
We'll be seeing the Northern Lights tonight.
We saw them last night as well. And here's JPMorgan now, up more than futures, $8.43. There's something going on here, Paul. And who knows where we'll be at 4:30, at 4 p.m. But I look at this and there's this gloom, and that's what I got out of JPMorgan's call. That's what I got out of Simone Makata at State Street. That's what I got out of Jennifer Lee at BMO Capital Markets. It just continues. The prosperity continues.
Well, I think it's one of your theories, Tom, is just, companies adapt, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's inflation, whether it's higher interest rates, now lower interest rates, they adapt. And you see it in a lot of those numbers. And even with Wells Fargo, Tom, Wells Fargo's stock is up 5% today.
I missed that. Thank you.
It's up again, very much like JPMorgan, up 23% year to date is Wells Fargo, up over 50% over the trailing 12 months, Wells Fargo. So some good performance out of the big banks here. And of course, we'll kick into gear next week when we got more
next
banks.
Week?
Yeah, more banks, and then it just floodgates open.
Giuseppe's father, any idea like what the schedule is next week? Do we have like Goldman Sachs on Monday or bank holiday?
So we don't have to work? Are we working on Monday?
Are we working on Monday?
The New York Stock Exchange is in session. You will be working because that's the schedule we follow.
Okay. So no long weekend for...
No.
Okay.
Columbus Day, we're here.
Okay. Didn't we used to get that off?
Maybe you did.
Yeah. John Tucker never gets a day off, folks. Is what he's trying to say to us. He's that indispensable.
John and I are laughing so hard because you're sitting at the dining room table at home and you got 8 people looking at you going, what is it with your world? You're not off for Columbus Day.
We'll be here. All right, so we'll see that. We'll have some earnings coming up next week, and we'll see on top of that.
We will. But we'll be here on Monday, folks. Seriously, it's just the most interesting time. And thanks to Joe Mathieu and Kaylee Lyons.
Yep.
I think they really advanced the conversation here into the weekend on this. And Margaret Brennan, we should mention, at Face the Nation. Look to Face the Nation, 2 p.m. on Sunday as well on Bloomberg at Radio. There's an important conversation there with the Speaker of the House, Speaker Johnson, as well. Currency markets say all. And the major theme here, folks, thanks to Damian Sassower for playing golf all week. Appreciate that, Damian. But the basic idea here is dollar strength, dollar resiliency, which Darrell Meyer came in. You did, our chief Irish guest. I mean,
Sure.
you came in, you nailed it there with Limerick and Shannon Airport.
We were all over it there for
all
a week.
the rest. And
Next trip will be the southern part of the island. We did the northern part of the island, so
Okay.
you got to do it right.
Very good. But the answer is HSBC and Darrell Meyer looking for a resilient dollar, and that's what we have. Yen above a 149, a 150 print on yen would really be something as well. We need to say thank you. Our team, extraordinary this week, getting Patricia Hurtado in on New York City, getting in Richard Haas for a substantial conversation. We say good morning, have a great weekend. Michigan statistics next.
closer.